Chapter 723. At this time, at the Springfield Kindergarten's parent-child activity site, the small square warmed by the sun was already very lively. Adults and children gathered around their respective tables, busy making their own handicrafts. Because they could play with their parents, the children were all very excited. Even if they didn't have any work to do, they were running around and shouting. What a lively scene. At Yang Yi's table, because Lan Hao Kai shamelessly asked the teacher, the two families finally sat together. Of course, Yang Yi had to come up with an idea. What should they build? It depends on the materials, what is suitable for, and how far can it be made, Yang Yi said, rubbing his chin as he walked around the table and looked at the old things piled high on it. After a while, Yang Yi had an idea. He took out a large used plastic oil bottle, the kind you can buy in the supermarket for a barrel of peanut oil, and a mineral water bottle. He said, "We also have old wires, ropes, and clothes hangers. We can make an old-fashioned well." Lan Hao Kai was very knowledgeable and quick-witted. When Murphy and Wu Jingjing were a little confused, he immediately understood. "You mean the old-fashioned wells in the countryside?" "Yes, they used a winch and a bucket to draw water." Yang Yi gestured and smiled. "This oil bottle, remove the logo, and it's transparent. We can use this to make a well. We can show the children how people use this old-fashioned well to get underground drinking water. This is not easy," Lan Hao Kai said with emotion. "Can you do it? I don't even know how this thing is made. I've only seen it a few times, but I've never touched it. Who still uses a well nowadays? Don't tell me, my hometown used to use this. After I changed the water pump last year, it became more convenient." Yang Yi took over. "It's okay, I'm familiar with this. I'll do it." At this time, the two girls who went to chat with neighbors came back. However, the two girls seemed to be chasing each other. Shishi hugged her father's arm and giggled as she hid behind him. Shishi messed around with Lan Xian for a while before she remembered to share the information she had obtained with everyone. Shishi was wearing a neat knitted sweater and a knee-length skirt. Her hair was tied up in cute braids. She gestured with her hands excitedly and said, "Papa, Uncle Lan, Chi-Chi's family wants to build a big house. Then Lu Weisha and her mom want to build a big boat that can sail in the water. Good idea, let's build a house." Lan Hao Kai snapped his fingers. He was inspired by Shishi's information. He smiled and said, "We have so many cardboard boxes. We can make a house out of them." "Uncle Lan, you know how to build houses too?" Shishi asked in surprise. At this time, Lan Xian was unhappy. She said loudly, "My father is the best at building houses. The house you're living in was also built by my father." Lan Hao Kai smiled wryly at Yang Yi. He reached out to pat Lan Xian's shoulder and said with a smile, "That's right, this is indeed my father's specialty. However, you have to keep a low profile. Don't let others hear you. What if others learn it?" Lan Xian's eyes widened. The little girl immediately covered her mouth and looked left and right, as if really worried that others would eavesdrop and learn it secretly. Shishi was also smiling happily. She whispered with Lan Xian. The two girls even made a shushing gesture at each other, and then they giggled to each other. With the division of labor, things were much easier. Boss Lan focused on building houses, while Yang Yi wanted to build his winnower's well. "What are we going to do?" Murphy asked from the side. Tong Tong was placed on the pram beside her. The ceiling could block out the bright sun. The little fellow was half lying on his back, looking at the pattern on the ceiling of the pram. Sometimes he would tilt his head to look at his mother beside him. From time to time, Shishi and other big sisters would run over to play with him. He was not lonely at all. Right now he was grinning and kicking his little legs. He was in a good mood. Hearing that Murphy also wanted to help, Yang Yi put down the mineral water bottle and plastic oil bottle. He picked up a delivery box and gestured. Smiling, he said, "Right now we need the frame of a well. You and Shishi cut open that delivery box. That is, open the side facing the well. Then dig a small hole here. The size should be big enough for my mineral water bottle to go straight up and down." Murphy nodded, satisfied. "I'll do it with Mom." Shishi heard her father's arrangements and jumped back happily. "I want to help too." Seeing that her little friend was not going to explore with her, Lan Xian couldn't help but follow over. She stood in front of Yang Yi and the others. Boss Lan was jealous and called out, "Hey Exine Heir, your father is here. You're not even helping your father, but running over to help someone else. Really, I've raised you for nothing." "Alright then, I'm going to help my father." Lan Exine ran back in a silly manner. Wu Jingjing was convulsing with laughter at the side. She was amused by her husband and daughter, this pair of buffoons. "Be careful. Knives and scissors, put them back in this box after you're done using them. Shishi, be careful too. Don't touch these sharp objects." Murphy and Shishi began to focus on cutting up the delivery box. Yang Yi watched for a while before giving them some instructions. He then went to work on his own well with peace of mind. It wasn't difficult to cut open the 2 plastic bottles. The important thing was to pay attention to the edges. Yang Yi was worried that they would cut the children's hands, so he first used sandpaper to grind them. Seeing that the results weren't ideal, he found Lance Hao Kai, who was a smoker, and took a lighter from him. He used the fire to slightly burn the edges of the plastic bottles. This way, the bottles became much rounder. The bottom of a mineral water bottle wasn't used to make a water bucket. The opening of a mineral water bottle was bigger than the bottom, so Yang Yi used the head. After cutting it, Yang Yi used the wire of the drying rack to make a handle for the water bucket. It wasn't easy to twist the handle in small places, but who asked Yang Yi to have extraordinary strength? Yang Yi wrapped the remaining drying rack with wires to increase friction. Using old shoelaces, he made a pulley. As long as he turned the handle of the pulley, he could use the physics principles of axles and levers to lift the water bucket from the well. Yang Yi had a clearer picture in his mind, so he was faster. Murphy and the other girls were even faster. After trimming the frame of the well, they were still not satisfied. Under Murphy's lead, Shishi followed her mother, picked up a crayon, and started to draw on the well. Good heavens! Originally, Yang Yi only wanted to make an old-fashioned well. Now, with the help of 2 women who loved beauty, this well would probably become the new favorite of the fashion industry. It was red, purple, pink, bright yellow, and so on. It also reflected the feelings of a young girl. Yang Yi looked at it for a while and smiled helplessly. He found 2 old clamps and used them as the support for the pulley. After Shishi and Murphy finished drawing, he began to assemble it. Papa, what else do I have to do?" The little girl was having fun. She didn't want to just sit there and watch, so she asked eagerly. Yang Yi turned his head and saw Shishi's expectant eyes. Although Murphy didn't say anything, she had the same enthusiastic eyes as Shishi. He smiled helplessly, pondered for a while, and said, "You 2 make 2 stickers. One is a well, and the other is a pulley. Make it look better. This way, when we show it to others, it will be more intuitive." "Okay," Murphy happily answered. She even rushed in front of her daughter. Chapter 724. Shishi, what did you and your dad do? Yang Yi finished assembling the well, and was pasting the instructions that Shishi and Murphy had made. Young Luochi was probably bored watching her parents build the house, so she sneaked over. She was attracted by the colorful thing from afar, so she came over curiously and squeezed beside Shishi to take a look. "This is a well, my grandpa's well," Shishi said sweetly. "But what is a well?" Young Luochi, who had grown up in the city, didn't understand. Shishi couldn't answer this question. Yang Yi, who had finished sticking the stickers on both sides, helped his daughter out of her predicament. He smiled and said, "A long time ago, when there was no running water, if people wanted to drink water, they had to dig a deep well in the ground to get clean water from the ground. Our well was made to simulate an old-fashioned well." Young Luochi finally understood, but she still looked at this new thing curiously. After taking care of Tong Tong and wiping his drool, Murphy turned around and poked Yang Yi. She said with interest, "Can you simulate how to draw water? I haven't seen how it works yet." Yang Yi saw that Lan Xian had also come over, and Shishi and Yang Luochi were looking at him eagerly. Naturally, he wouldn't refuse and nodded with a smile. He first filled the plastic oil bottle that was used as the well with water. The oil bottle wasn't small, so it took a few bottles of mineral water to fill half of the water level. "Look carefully. We're going to use this bucket to draw the water out of the well." Yang Yi shook the bucket made of inverted mineral water bottles and gestured to the children. In order to see clearly, Shi, Lan Xian, and Yang Luoqi all moved to the front and looked in through the open side of the delivery box. At this moment, the three of them were bursting with curiosity, so they only cared about watching and didn't have the time to talk. The three of them pursed their lips tightly, and their 6 obsidian-like beautiful eyes stared closely, afraid that they would miss the slightest detail. Yang Yi shook the handle of the winch and lowered the bucket. Because the bottom of the bucket was smaller than the opening of the bucket, it wouldn't float straight on the water surface after it was lowered. Some of the clear well water had already flowed in along the edge of the bucket. If you're afraid that the water won't come in, we can swing the rope left and right. But this is a technical job, so it's not easy to master. Yang Yi let go of the handle and shook his shoelaces. This was indeed not easy. Yang Yi tried a few times before he could swing the bucket properly. Of course, by this time, the bucket was almost full. Yang Luoqi, on the other hand, stood there quietly and watched. Cici and Lan Xian, on the other hand, couldn't help but feel that it was quite fun. Cici was fidgeting around, eager to try, and Lan Xian couldn't wait to get started. Of course, she didn't dare to act recklessly. She just couldn't help but touch the handle of the winch. Yang Yi saw it and didn't blame her. Instead, he encouraged Lan Xian to do it. The water is full. Now you can pull it up. Xian, try it. Turn it in this direction and pull the bucket up. After successfully pulling up a bucket of water from the well, Lan Xian was overjoyed. She turned around and was about to tell Lan Zhoukai. She also jumped around excitedly. She held her father's arm and chattered with him about her feelings. It's really possible. Papa, I think it's super fun. Yang Yi smiled and poured the water in the bucket back into the well, restoring it to its original state. Then he asked, "Okay, who wants to try?" Me. She raised her hand happily. Me too. Yang Luoqi was also beaming at this moment. The shy little girl was not nervous in front of Yang Yi's uncle. Hearing this, Lan Xian didn't have time to finish talking to her father. She quickly turned back, raised her hand and shouted, "I want to play too." "Xian, are you already played with it just now?" Cici pouted her small mouth, somewhat unhappy. Murphy was worried that the little guys would quarrel because of this small matter, so she quickly comforted them. Chi has to go back to help her papa and mom later. Let Chi play first, okay? Then she will be the second. Xian just played half of it. You will be the third. But it doesn't matter. Our well is here. You can play at any time, right? Murphy's gentle arrangement was acceptable to Shi and Lan Xian. The two little girls eagerly watched Yang Luoqi's operation. However, although Yang Luoqi was the first to play, she was unfamiliar with the operation and couldn't handle the bucket well. Shi and Lan Xian enthusiastically surrounded her and helped her. In the end, it turned into a scene of the three little girls working together to draw water. "Don't you want to play?" Yang Yi watched for a while, then turned to look at Murphy and asked with a smile. He felt that Murphy was also very interested in this handicraft, which could be seen from her performance just now. "Even if you want to play, you can't compete with the children." Murphy's tone changed and said with some pride, "Moreover, after today's activity, aren't you going to take it home? When I get home, I'll play as long as I want." Yang Yi couldn't help laughing. The activity here also attracted the other children. Chen Shiyin, Lu Weisha, Nan Zhaoyu, and other children were all rushing over. They had a strong interest in the well that Shi and her father had made. Yang Yi encouraged Shi to take over and explain the theory of the well to the other children. Although the little girl was stumbling, and there were many parts where she didn't use the right words or didn't explain clearly, at least she was brave enough to try. Yang Yi and Murphy were very happy to see this scene. Of course, they weren't idle either. After Lan Zhoukai finished his house, Murphy and Wu Jingjing took the remaining materials and skillfully cut and decorated the house made of cardboard boxes. The most amazing thing was still an old tong shoe on the roof. It was like a stroke of genius, filling the house with a mysterious and artistic touch. "Big brother Lan, your house is very sturdy," Murphy said with a smile as she glued the shoe to Wu Jingjing. "Of course," Lan Zhoukai said with a smile to Murphy. He even winked at Yang Yi and said, "Why don't you see whose delivery box you're using?" Sahara Express, showing the customers care from the details. Of course, there was still a small accident on Shishi's side. A little boy used too much force and broke the support of the pulley. This accident almost made Shishi cry, and Lan Xian even ran over to complain to Yang Yi. Fortunately, Yang Yi stepped forward bravely and used tape to fix the support. The little girl wiped her tears, and her eyes were red. Only then did the rain clear up, and she returned to her previous cheerful self. It had to be said that every family was very serious about making handicrafts out of old materials today. After all, it was a parent-child activity, so the parents and children all had a lot of fun. Yang Yi took some time to walk around with Shishi and saw a lot of creative works. The simplest and most interesting one was a family using long wooden clips, buttons, rubber bands, and straws cut into sections to make a small four-wheeled car. Although this four-wheeled car didn't look special because it used different buttons, and the four wheels were of different sizes and colors, it was still a very interesting idea. In the end, Shishi and Lan Xian went up happily and showed off the well and big house that they and their parents had made in front of everyone. They were even awarded the technological handicraft Big Red Flower by Teacher Mu. After coming down, the two little girls were very excited. Their little chests puffed out, and they wanted their parents to see their big red flower. Yang Yi knew that every child had received a big red flower. Teacher Mu had come up with a variety of ways to commend the children, saying that they were very special, but what did it matter? In a parent-child activity, the parents and children were all happy. Then, the children gained joy and glory from their work. In their little minds, the seeds of diligence and frugality were planted. That was enough. Chapter 725. Like Yang Yi and Murphy, there weren't many parents who could participate in their child's parent-child activities. Many parents still needed to go to work, so at most they would send one of them to attend. And if the scope was broadened to society, some people would be so busy that they could only let their elderly parents attend their child's school activities. Ewing was like this. She had already changed shifts with the assistant foreman because the teacher arranged for Yu Xiaowei to participate in the school's poetry recitation competition. However, the assistant foreman suddenly caught a cold and couldn't come. She could only come back and replace her and couldn't cheer for her daughter. Although she let her mother go on her behalf, Ewing still felt very guilty. She was looking forward to getting off work quickly so that she could go home and apologize to her daughter. Of course, Ewing didn't bring her personal emotions to work. She still had a warm smile on her face as she commanded the waiters in the lobby. As usual, the restaurant maintained an orderly state of service. "Sistering, didn't you mention that Yang Yi last month?" Finally, when it was time to get off work, Ewing was changing her shoes in the changing room when a waitress came over and said, "And what's wrong?" Ewing asked puzzledly. "Nothing, my boyfriend saw that I mentioned him last time, and went to check it out. He's going to take me to see his movie tonight. I heard it's very good." The waitress smiled. "Are you showing off your love in front of Sister Ing, who has been single for many years?" Ewing smiled as she rubbed the waitress's bangs and said angrily, "No, we also heard that Yang Yi has a book on the market today. It's just that we don't like to read. However, I don't know if Sister Ing would like it, so I'm just telling you." The waitress smiled and ran away. Ewing shook her head, picked up her bag, and quickly walked out. She had indeed been studying Yang Yi's fairy tales recently to learn Yang Yi's writing style. However, this didn't mean that she was willing to spend money to buy books. Right now, Yu Xiaowei hadn't finished reading the first part of Shishi's bedtime story, so Ewing wasn't in a hurry to buy the second part. When she returned home, it was brightly lit again. Before Ewing went to take a shower, she asked Yu Xiaowei about her performance in the poetry recitation competition today. "I only got the second prize." Yu Xiaowei turned around and went to the room to take out a thin certificate and a notebook as a reward, and said in a low voice. She lowered her head as if she felt that she had let down her mother's expectations. "Second prize is already very impressive. When I was studying, I didn't even get an award." Ewing was gratified and comforted her with heartache. "Keep up the good work, keep working hard." Yu Xiaowei nodded obediently. At this time, Yu Ying's mother handed over a thick letter. She looked at Ewing strangely and said, Inger, someone sent a letter to the post office today. Who sent it to you? Although it was signed by a publishing company, Yu Ying's mother felt that there was some hope. In the eyes of the people of her era, letters were used to convey emotions. They were clearly in the same city, so why did they have to send a letter? Ewing didn't tell her mother that she was trying to submit a manuscript to a publisher, so her mother misunderstood and thought that a man was sending Ewing a love letter. Yu Xiaowei also looked curiously at the thing in her mother's hand. Ewing didn't know that her mother had misunderstood. When she saw the sender's signature on the envelope, she was stunned. Her right hand that was holding the letter trembled slightly. Of course, Ewing didn't know what this letter meant. Was it a pass? Or was it a rejection? Ewing was worried that the latter was more likely, because how long had it been since she submitted the manuscript? A week? 2 weeks? Didn't they say that the efficiency of these publishing companies was very low? That's why there was a reply so quickly, right? Mom, what is this? Yu Xiaowei couldn't help but ask. It's a letter. Ewing came back to her senses and said vaguely while opening it. Ewing still had some hope that she could face it bravely. Ms. Ewing, congratulations. Seeing the first few words, Yu Ying's head buzzed and became blank. Is this a success? Yu Ying's whole body was trembling. She even felt that her mouth was dry and her thoughts seemed to have stopped. Inger, what's wrong? Her mother saw that something was wrong and hurriedly asked. Is it from that bastard? Ewing slowly came back to her senses. Looking at her mother's anxious face and her daughter's worried eyes, she felt warm in her heart. She focused again and looked at the letter just now. That's right. The main idea of the letter was to tell her that her outline and work had been approved, and the support fund approved her. It wasn't 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 or 40,000, but a whole 50,000 yuan. After that, it was mainly to inform her to sign a contract with the publishing company. If she wasn't from Jiangcheng, she could contact the publishing company to reimburse her travel expenses. There was another thick stack of documents in the attached letter. It was a sample contract. Ewing finally understood why the other party had to send a letter. Of course, if she had a computer and provided an email, there would be no need to send a letter. Actually, Ewing only saw the latter part of the letter later. When she saw the amount of support she received, Ewing was so excited that she hugged her daughter. Inga, what's wrong? Don't scare me, her mother asked anxiously. Ewing raised her head. Her face was already covered in tears. She reached out and hugged her mother and daughter together. Unable to control herself, she sobbed. Mom, I did it. I really did it. Of course, Ewing was still worried that she didn't get the money. After being excited for an entire night, she called the assistant manager who stood her up yesterday and asked her to help cover for her. She nervously boarded the bus and went to Sahara Publishing in Tingshan District to sign the contract. The person who received her was still editor Wen Xiefeng. Before signing the contract, Wen Xiefeng carefully explained the details of the contract to Ewing, including the rights and responsibilities of both parties. After signing the contract, Ewing was brought to the finance department by Wen Xiefeng. The finance staff directly arranged for the foundation's account to transfer the money to her bank account through online banking. 50,000 yuan. Ewing, who had opened a text message, received the notification that the huge stone in her heart had been lifted. Our chief editor would like to meet you. Is it convenient for you, Ms. Yu? Wen Xiefeng asked with a smile when he saw Yu Ying's tense brows loosen. The one who wanted to meet Yu Ying was Lu Benji. Of course, before meeting Yu Ying, he didn't know who this name represented. It's actually you. Lu Benji was a little surprised when he saw Yu Ying. Subsequently, Lu Benji commented on the outline and story outline of Yu Ying's work. He gave a high evaluation of Yu Ying's story. You used the perspective of a rag doll to describe the series of adventures it went through after it escaped from its young master, as well as its growth in the process. This idea is very novel and interesting. In the opinion of our editorial department, if you can write it and write it well, it will be a very wonderful children's book. Ewing was a little flattered and asked, Does Mr. Yang Yi think so too? Mr. Yang Yi? Lu Benji was a little surprised. He smiled and said, Let's not talk about how he has the time to come to the publishing house to participate in the review. Moreover, Didn't Mr. Yang already tell you that he won't interfere with the foundation's selection? I thought it was just a casual remark, Ewing said embarrassedly. Of course not, Mr. Yang has always been a man of his words. Lu Benji said seriously. Of course, Lu Benji didn't call Ewing over to praise her. He pointed out that when Ewing submitted the manuscript, the first 3 chapters weren't written well. There were a lot of flaws in the writing style. These 3 chapters will definitely need to be rewritten, but I hope that you don't rush to rewrite them. Instead, you should listen to a few of our experienced senior editors' writing classes and study the works of Mr. Yang Yi or other people. It won't be too late to write them then. Lu Benji said excitedly. He even got up and took out a complete set of Yang Yi's works from the cabinet. However, he only picked out the fairy tales written by Yang Yi and handed them to Ewing. These books are for you. I hope they will be helpful to you. Ewing didn't expect that she would be able to own Yang Yi's works without buying them. Moreover, Lu Benji gave her a hardcover book that Ewing couldn't bear to buy. What Ewing bought herself was just a simple paperback book. Thank you, Chief Editor Lu. This time, Ewing was really touched by Sahara Publishing House's concern. Not only did they give her financial support, but they also allowed her to attend classes, and even gave her books for her to study. How could a publishing house be so considerate? Don't thank me. If you can create a wonderful work, our publishing house will also be proud of you. Lu Benji smiled. However, he put on a serious face and said, Madam Yu, in the end, I still hope that you can understand that the original intention of our support fund is to hope that more wonderful children's literature will emerge from the Chinese literary world, as well as more outstanding children's literature writers. Ewing was briefly stunned before she listened seriously. Although the financial support fund for you might be a huge income for your current life, I hope that you can look further ahead. But I hope that you can set your sights further and work hard to write your work well. Our publishing house has a complete supply chain waiting to support the release of your work. Adaptation of a picture book or even an anime adaptation in the future is possible, as long as your work is exciting enough. Lu Benji said slowly, this 50,000 yen financial support fund is really too little compared to your future income. Lu Benji would talk to every recipient of the 50,000 yen financial support fund. And his purpose was obvious. Yang Yi didn't think it through. He thought that he could realize his ideas by giving money, but there were still many short-sighted people in this world. It was inevitable that there would be authors who would disappear after taking the money. Although the publishing house could still take back their ideas as compensation, that would be the opposite of Yang Yi's purpose. Lu Benji talked to them one by one, hoping that he wouldn't see such an unpleasant situation happen. Ewing understood. She wasn't stupid. She nodded seriously and said, Chief Editor Lu, don't worry. I will work hard. I won't lose the watermelon for the sesame. Chapter 726. Just as Lu Benji had said, Yang Yi was busy with many things, so how could he have the time to care about the trivial matters of Sahara Publishing? At this moment, he was also busy with an important matter, choosing a primary school for his daughter. A luxurious sedan slightly longer than a normal car slowly came to a stop on the street in front of Wangfu School. However, it was now around 11 o'clock, nearing the time for school to end in the morning. The luxurious cars outside the gates were already in a long queue, so it could only park a little further away. In the car, Lance Haokai was talking to Yang Yi. You don't like Shuejing Primary School, and Edmond Primary School is too bad. Alright, now that we're looking at Wangfu School, I'm sure both of us will be satisfied. In the morning, starting from Shuejing Primary School, which was the closest to the Villa District, Yang Yi and the others had already looked at 2 schools. There were indeed many areas they were dissatisfied with. Other than being a little closer, Shuejing Primary School had no other good points, while Edmond Primary School was just as Lance Haokai had said before. The campus was very narrow, not giving much space for the children to move around. Wangfu School was the 3rd school they looked at. Yang Yi was unconcerned with Lance Haokai's praise, saying calmly, let's look first. Leaving the bodyguard cum chauffeur in the car, Lance Haokai and Yang Yi got out of the car together and walked towards Wangfu School. This school was indeed as Lan Zhoukai had said. It was strictly managed with high walls and a thick, cold gate. It was like a prison standing in front of Yang Yi. Yang Yi and Lance Hao Kai ran into a problem at the gates. The gate guard was not like the other schools, letting them pass after hearing that they were parents here for an inspection. He sized up Lance Hao Kai and Yang Yi for a while, and then asked them to wait for a while before calling to inform the school authorities. After that, the school's customer service manager came over to attend to them. However, Lance Hao Kai and Yang Yi still had to register, including their ID cards, at the gate guard's office. Lance Hao Kai very casually signed his name on the registration book, but when she heard that he had to deposit his identity card, Boss Lan was displeased. Finally, she said impatiently, "Why is your Royal Family Academy so troublesome? Is this ID card something that can be casually used? If I give it to you, can you bear the responsibility if I lose a few $100 million?" Yang Yi didn't say anything. He stood behind Lance Hao Kai and looked at him quietly. Of course, personal information couldn't be leaked. When the manager heard Lance Hao Kai's words, he was a little surprised. Of course, he didn't dare to provoke Lance Hao Kai. He glanced at Lance Hao Kai's name and hurriedly comforted Lance Hao Kai. He told him to calm down and that he had to report to his superior. Lance Hao Kai's name still had an effect. Very quickly, it was clear that the school had already sent someone to investigate. Not long after, the vice principal of Wangfu School, a capable middle-aged woman, hurried over. "Mr. Lan, I'm very sorry to have kept you waiting. The people below don't know the rules." This vice principal called Chen Kuei apologized and thanked him profusely. "You don't need to deposit your identity card?" Lance Hao Kai put on airs and said with a displeased expression, "Of course not. You are our Jiangqing City's business card. Who doesn't know you? If I ask for your identity card, I'll be laughed at." Chen Kuei smiled apologetically. "He doesn't need it either?" Lance Hao Kai gave her a thumbs up and pointed behind him at Yang Yi. "No need. Your bodyguard is also trustworthy," said Chen Kuei quickly. Instantly, Lance Hao Kai and Yang Yi were both stunned. Bodyguard? Whose bodyguard? After a while, Yang Yi saw Lance Hao Kai turn his head and smile mockingly. He rolled his eyes helplessly. Lance Hao Kai turned his head and couldn't help but laugh. I'm dying of laughter. You said he's my bodyguard." Actually, he really did look like one. Yang Yi was tall and muscular. His muscles also bulged his clothes. He was indeed the template of a bodyguard. If he didn't wear casual clothes and changed into a black suit with a pair of black sunglasses, then he would look even more like one. Moreover, Yang Yi stood behind Lance Hao Kai and didn't say anything, quietly watching the show. In other people's eyes, Lance Hao Kai was a big boss with a net worth of billions. It was normal for him to have a bodyguard with him. Chen Kuei was a little confused by Lance Hao Kai's laughter. After she figured out Yang Yi's identity, she apologized to Yang Yi with sweat all over her head. Finally, it was over. Chen Kuei personally brought Lance Hao Kai and Yang Yi to inspect the school. It had to be said that an aristocratic school with a tuition fee of 200,000 was indeed different. The scale of the campus was like a small university. It had a library, sports field, swimming pool, badminton hall, etc. It was all set up according to the standards of a university. When Yang Yi saw the library building, he couldn't help but click his tongue. Jiangchuan's library was just like this, right? With such a tuition fee, how many people in Jiangqing are qualified to send their children to school? Yang Yi couldn't help but ask this question. Chen Kuei smiled and said, "There are a lot of people. Jiangqing doesn't lack rich people. By the way, Mr. Yang, you're from the entertainment industry. You should know that in Jiangqing's Binhai district there are still many celebrities living there. However, they will also send their children to the Wangfu to study, even though Binhai and Tingshan are still a little far away. Many parents are busy with work. Most of the time, they don't have time to accompany their children. Our school starts from the first grade of primary school. You can rest assured that our dormitory is just like a hotel. It's luxurious and comfortable. It's a single room. There are professionals to help clean and wash clothes. If you come to visit your children, you can stay with them for a few days." Yang Yi shook his head and said, "There's no need for that. We will send our children to school. They're so young." They don't need to stay in the dormitory. Of course, this depends on the needs of your parents. The school will try its best to satisfy all of your needs, Chen Kuei said with a smile. Along the way, Chen Kuei kept bragging about her school's teachers and management. She made the Wangfu school sound very good. This was nothing. Yang Yi had received a lot of information from Lanzhou Kai before. He trusted his own eyes more. Chen Kuei mainly brought Yang Yi and Lanzhou Kai to inspect the primary school. But even so, Yang Yi still saw a few boys with dyed hair running around. One of them even had a mohawk. This made Yang Yi frown. Your school allows them to dye their hair? Yang Yi couldn't help but ask. As a parent, sometimes he would find that he had become picky. Even though Yang Yi didn't care about others dyeing their hair and making it into all kinds of strange hairstyles, which was very common in the entertainment circle, when it came to his daughter, Yang Yi rejected these outliers. He didn't even want his daughter to come into contact with this kind of culture. The school pays attention to individualization. The students have some personal demands and individualized performance. We won't interfere too much. This is the management spirit we learned from foreign private schools, Chen Kuei said. At this time, Yang Yi had some doubts. The problem began to gradually reveal itself. Not long after, Yang Yi saw some students playing with their phones in the corridor. In order to make it easier for the children to contact their parents, we won't prohibit the children from carrying communication devices. Chen Kuei noticed Yang Yi's gaze and quickly explained. Of course, when the teacher is in class, the children have to listen carefully. They can't use their phones. Yang Yi didn't say anything. He looked at the 3 teaching buildings in the high school from afar and fell into deep thought. Chapter 727. Of course, to be able to attract so many rich people to send their children here, Wangfu School wasn't completely useless. After that, Vice Principal Chen Kuei brought Lanzhou Kai and Yang Yi to visit the interest clubs of the students. Basketball, football, cycling, and other sports clubs, Go Chinese chess and other card clubs, music clubs, and even many other small clubs. Although it was class time and there were no students in the clubs, there were still many photos in the yearbooks of some of the clubs. It could be seen that each of these children was more youthful than the other, and they were full of energy in their hobbies. After each of them achieved glory, for example, Wangfu School's basketball team won the Jiangnan Province High School League Championship. Their faces were brimming with smiles, and it looked very exciting. For every interest club, we will hire a professional coach to guide them. This way, every child can really learn something from playing. Chen Kuei saw Lanzhou Kai's interest and hurriedly explained. Lanzhou Kai and Yang Yi also visited the international department of Wangfu School. In fact, 80% of the students here didn't take the National College entrance examination. The education they received was oriented towards international affairs. Yang Yi couldn't help but be bewitched by Chen Kuei's exaggerated explanation. He felt that the education in China was a little dogmatic, and their education model was very humane. Under our education, the admission rate of our students is 100%. Even if some students still want to go to a domestic school, but their college entrance examination results aren't ideal. But it doesn't matter, we have double insurance. Before that, they also took the American and European exams, and they will eventually be admitted to a foreign university. Chen Kuei said proudly. So, among the students who took the college entrance examination, how many of them were admitted to a key university? Yang Yi finally calmed down and asked a question that hit the nail on the head. Although he said that he wouldn't measure his daughter's life achievements by her grades, Yang Yi still hoped that she could spontaneously and willingly learn from a group of good students. Whether it was the content in the textbooks or the humanities and sciences that she was interested in, Yang Yi's question stumped Chen Kuei. She stuttered for a while before saying, "Actually, studying abroad is equivalent to gilding. It's more valuable than studying in China." Yang Yi and Lanzhou Kai came out of Wangfu School and got into the car. Only then did Yang Yi smile gently and say to Lanzhou Kai, "Big brother Lan, after seeing it, do you still think this Wangfu School is good?" Lanzhou Kai was a little hesitant. He hesitated for a moment and said, "It's indeed a little different from what I imagined. However, Wang's Mansion School is right." Foreign universities are indeed better than domestic ones. Look at the world rankings. Yang Yi shook his head and said, I'm talking about its management, personalized management. What kind of management is this? They don't care if students dye their hair or play with their phones in school. You might not have seen it just now, but I saw someone smoking on the rooftop of the high school. Yang Yi's eyesight was indeed good. At this moment, he had even noticed something. He pursed his lips and gestured for Lans Hao Kai to look out the window. Right now it was noon after school. The luxury cars outside Wang Fu School were starting to get restless. However, other than a group of primary school students, there were also many tall middle and high school students. The older students were in 2s and 3s, with boys and girls mixed together. Of course, at the school gates, their behavior was not particularly out of line. However, the direction Yang Yi was pointing in was already at the end of the street. A high school girl wearing Wang Fu School's uniform was hugging and kissing a boy who was also wearing the same uniform, and then reluctantly leaving. Actually, it was not surprising for high school students to fall in love. However, when looking at the problem from the perspective of a father, many things had to be taken seriously. Lans Hao Kai's face also darkened. Wang Fu School's disadvantage is that it does not have strict management. Yang Yi hit the nail on the head. It's also an elite school. Although Xuejing's school has only been established for a short time, and the teaching staff is weak, in terms of management, it is much better than Wang Fu School. How would they dare to care? Lans Hao Kai was now standing on Yang Yi's side. He shook his head and said meaningfully, how would they bear to care? These students earn 200,000 a year. In addition, high school, middle school, and primary school students from 6 to 18 years old are placed together. Yang Yi shook his head and said, I don't think this is a good thing. For example, the high school couple just now. In the eyes of the ignorant primary school students, their performance might be a cool role model, worth imitating. This was what Yang Yi and Lans Hao Kai did not want to see. Lans Hao Kai had previously liked Wang Fu School, mainly because of its high threshold, rich students, and international standards. However, now it seemed that Wang Fu School did indeed have a serious flaw. At noon they went back to eat and rest. In the afternoon, Yang Yi and Lans Hao Kai continued their inspection. After looking at 2 private schools in Tingshan District, Yang Yi and Lans Hao Kai finally came to the old district of Jiang City, Huijia Primary School in Wuhu District. In fact, in the eyes of ordinary people, Huijia Primary School, which charged 20 to 30,000 a year, was also an elite school. However, in the eyes of the big boss, Lans Hao Kai, the standard was a little low. However, Huijia Primary School had a good reputation. Although there was no national exam like the college entrance examination, it was said that the children from this school were fought over by many famous high schools. It was worth mentioning here that Yang Yi heard from Guozi, who came back from filming The Fat Agent, that Huijia Primary School was Guozi's alma mater. Therefore, Yang Yi and Lans Hao Kai also came because of the school's reputation. However, this time, Lans Hao Kai did not put on airs like he did at Wang Fu School. Huijia Primary School's management was very strict. Outsiders were not allowed to enter. However, the guards knew that they were parents who came to inspect the school, so they sent someone to receive them. They only needed to make a simple registration, and did not ask for any documents to be used as collateral. Boss Lan also saved the trouble of revealing his identity. The person who received Yang Yi and Lans Hao Kai was a young female teacher from Huijia Primary School. She brought Lans Hao Kai and Yang Yi to tour the school grounds. Along the way, Yang Yi saw many children in neat Huijia Primary School uniforms running around happily. How is the management of your school? After Lans Hao Kai's experience at Wang Fu School, his train of thought had changed very quickly. He interrupted the female teacher's description of the school's history and asked straightforwardly, if I want to entrust my child to your school, I don't want her to come into contact with those bad students who have bad habits in society. I don't want her to dye her hair and swear. Do you understand what I mean? The female teacher smiled and said, I understand, Mr. Lan. The management of our school is divided into 2 types. The first type is systematic management. The school has clear rules and regulations that require students not to dye their hair or wear fancy accessories. They are also not allowed to fight, bully others, and other bad habits. The systematic management is supervised and punished by the teachers in the moral education department. The other type is outside the system. It is managed by our teachers and form teachers. Through reasonable persuasion and guidance, we will guide the children to develop a positive, kind, and optimistic personality. Just like you said, those students who have bad habits and refuse to change despite repeated warnings, our teachers in the moral education department will logically and legally dissuade them, or expel them according to the contract signed between their parents and the school when they entered the school. We will not let them stay and affect the other children. Yang Yi was not just listening to the other's description. He was also observing, looking left and right, trying to find some clues from the children's behavior. However, Yang Yi still did not find anything that made him unhappy. It was not as if there were no children quarreling. In the distant third-floor corridor, 2 senior primary school students were talking about something with red-faced faces. However, Yang Yi felt that quarreling was still normal and acceptable behavior. Is there some kind of activity going on here? Yang Yi looked at the banner hanging outside the school's small auditorium with interest. Peeking in from the entrance, Yang Yi could see the figures of many students and parents. Oh, it's like this. Our Huijia Primary School holds a different theme at the end of every month. For example, last month's theme was music. Activities such as singing competitions and musical performances were held in the small auditorium. But this month's theme is humanities. We have reading activities and poetry recitation competitions. Next month, it will be natural sciences and a scientific modeling competition. These activities can stimulate the students' interest in independent learning outside of school. It also allows students with different specialties to have ample space to display their full potential. The female teacher saw that Yang Yi was interested and took the initiative to invite him. Today's event is a poetry recitation competition for the senior students. Do you want to go in and take a look? Yang Yi and Lans Hao Kai did not have any objections. They went in and watched for a while. Although the children's competition was somewhat exaggerated and unnatural, it was clear that they had indeed prepared for a long time. The enthusiasm they displayed made Yang Yi and Lans Hao Kai unable to help but smile as they watched. In terms of nurturing children's interests, Huijia Primary School and Wangfu School were tied. Both schools used different methods, but each had its own exciting aspects. I heard that in order to enroll in your school, I have to pass an interview? Yang Yi asked after they came out. Yes, because there are many families who apply to Huijia Primary School every year. And our Huijia Primary School also hopes to ensure the quality of our school. Just like the problem that Mr. Lan was worried about before, we hope to screen out some students who may cause other parents concerns from the beginning and create a good environment for the children. Therefore, we have to arrange such an interview at the end of May. Speaking of this, the female teacher became a little serious. Although it was said that education was non-discriminatory, and Huijia Primary School did not accept students with bad conduct, which would inevitably cause some people to criticize it, this was a matter of opinion. Moreover, Huijia Primary School was a private school, so it naturally could make its own choice. Students and parents have to go through our interview separately. Of course, this interview is only a moral examination, especially for our children. We will not ask them what they learned in kindergarten, because we will teach them in school. However, we hope that the students and their parents who study in Huijia Primary School have good morals and education. This is more in line with our teaching philosophy, the female teacher said. After the inspection of Huijia Primary School, it was almost time for Springfield Kindergarten to be let out. Yang Yi and Lans Hao Kai took the car back. What do you think? Huijia Primary School. Yang Yi was obviously a little tempted. It was not only because of the female teacher's exaggerated praise, but also because Yang Yi could see the vitality of this school from his own observation. He could also see the positive energy from the smiles on the faces of the students. This was the scene that he hoped to see when she was a student. Lans Hao Kai sighed and said, "Bro, do you know what I am most afraid of in my life? Exams?" Yang Yi laughed. Lans Hao Kai looked up at a 45-degree angle to the sky and choked on his tears. He said bitterly, "I thought that after becoming a boss, I would be the only one who could test others, and I wouldn't have to take exams." For Xionaire, what's wrong with facing it bravely this time? Yang Yi laughed. What if you don't pass? How embarrassing would that be? Boss Lan was very conflicted. Chapter 728. Although Yang Yi and Lance Kai preferred Huijia Primary School, there were many other private primary schools in Jiangcheng. Moreover, there was still a long time before Shishi and Lan Xian graduated, so the two families had yet to settle down. As Lance Kai had to rush back to Jinling City, the two decided to change the time to continue the inspection. However, time passed very quickly. In the blink of an eye, it was April, when the trees were blooming. In April in Jiangnan, the spring rain was like smoke, the flowers were blooming, and the sparrows were chirping. It was as if they had dodged the last bit of the winter chill, lazily spreading out a poetic picture. Many things happened at the end of March and the beginning of April. First of all, they were extremely picky. There was nothing to be picky about in terms of the program. Yang Yi did not participate in the next few episodes, but the quality was still very high. It had to be said that under the protection of copyright, the entertainment industry in this world was very developed. The quality and ability of the employees were also much higher than those in Yang Yi's previous life. Even without Yang Yi's planning, the planning staff of China Star Productions could still do this program well. They filled in their own endless imagination on the framework given by Yang Yi, tormenting the 6 extremely picky stars with all kinds of fancy tricks. Don't think that after these wily old foxes figured out the gameplay of the program, they could easily handle it. The directing team and planning staff were also fighting a battle of wits and courage with them. For example, in the process of finding clues for the mission, Dan Hongkue liked to look for cameras and photographers. Places with such arrangements usually had clues. Later, the program team put in a lot of effort and resources to set up such arrangements in places where there were no clues. It was a mixture of truth and falsehood to confuse these old foxes and make their thoughts of taking advantage of loopholes fall through. It was also such a battle of wits and courage that made the program more exciting. The ratings also kept rising. In the early April episode, the extremely high ratings had already broken the ratings record of Shanghai TV station's variety shows. However, in the episode where Yang Yi appeared, the influence of the poem he wrote at the Cold Mountain Temple was only gradually reflected at the end of March. Most of the audience only felt that Yang Yi's poem was written with good calligraphy. The poem was recited quite smoothly. Although it was not written by him, it was still a solid act. Perhaps some college student who majored in Chinese copied the poem with interest and brought it to school for his professor to appreciate. Only then did the poem gradually enter the field of vision of the big shots in the poetry and ancient literature circles. The night mooring at Maple Bridge, that has been passed down for thousands of years, is naturally not as simple as the words flow smoothly in the eyes of ordinary people like me. The first 2 sentences are short, but Mom wrote 6 images that are on the verge of coming out. The falling moon, the weeping crow, the sky full of frost, the river, the fishing fire, and the sleepless man. Although the last 2 sentences have fewer images, it successfully creates a kind of ethereal mood. The sound of the midnight bell reflects the depth, tranquility, and solitude of the night, completely sublimating the traveler's melancholy. Of course, the old professors in the ancient literature and ancient poetry circles had analyzed this poem in more detail. There were even people who compared the description of the chimes in the night to many other poems. They found that this poem was still the best. The appearance of night mooring at Maple Bridge caused the poetry world to go into a frenzy. Perhaps many people thought that this was a poem written by a modern person. Even if it was not written in recent years, it was a work of nearly 100 years. Therefore they took great pleasure in evaluating it. Some sighed, and some were critical. However, no one questioned Yang Yi's claim on the television program that he did not write the poem. It was indeed impossible. For a young boy, no matter how high his literary attainment was, how could he write such an ancient poem that was both artistic and poetic? How could he write such a deep and concise melancholy? They even imagined Zhang Ji's appearance. An old man who had experienced the vicissitudes of life, unrecognized talent, hidden in the city. They even launched a search for Zhang Ji. Later, many people tried to impersonate him, but they were all exposed by these critical scholars. The search was left unfinished. The calligraphy world also gained popularity. They felt that Yang Yi's calligraphy was terrible. It was indeed incomparable to a professional calligrapher. They organized several groups of people to rewrite Night Mooring at Maple Bridge, at Gusuhanshan Temple. They even had people carve a stone tablet and send it over. The cunning monk did not refuse anyone, but he still kept Yang Yi's original work. He even secretly asked a master to carve it into a stone tablet. Perhaps he, with his great wisdom, had seen through all of this? The Cantonese song sung by Yang Yi and Murphy was praised by the musicians, and became a small hit. Yang Yi's version squeezed into the top 20 sales, but that was all. After all, it was a Cantonese song. It was very difficult for it to become popular in mainland China. However, a film company in Hong Kong made a big production wuxia film. The original novel was very famous. The male and female lead were entangled in love. In the end, the female lead sadly died like Ling, in The Legend of the Sword and Fairy. Only then did the male lead regret. They wanted to use Yang Yi's song as an interlude. After Yang Yi understood the plot, he did not object and authorized them. At the end of March, Murphy's Fairy Tale Town received a lot of attention. It squeezed into the top 10 sales as soon as it was released. Although it was still far from first place, this song performed much better than other Cantonese songs. It also received a lot of fans' love. At the beginning of April, Yang Yi sent 2 new songs to Chen Yijie, who was still in Hong Kong. This time, according to Tianxiang's request, Yang Yi sent Chen Yijie Chinese songs. Chen Yijie was preparing to enter the mainland market. These songs were very important to him. There was a small interlude. Chen Yijie tactfully and bitterly asked why Yang Yi did not give him a high-pitched song like Listen to the Sea. Yang Yi had a song that was very suitable for Chen Yijie, but he felt that it was not the time to give it to Chen Yijie. The sales of The Shawshank Redemption had always been good. Because of Yang Yi's fame, the book had squeezed into the bestseller list on the first day it was released, and had never fallen off. However, the reviews of the readers were a bit polarized. After all, it was a first-person novel. Most Chinese readers did not like first-person narration. They felt that reading it was awkward. And a large number of people liked the book. Even if they felt that reading it was awkward, the readers who understood the book still gave it a very high evaluation. It had to be said that there were still many people in the entertainment industry who had a discerning eye. In less than a week after The Shawshank Redemption was released, someone approached Sahara Publishing House to buy the movie rights of this book. However, Yang Yi was very cautious about the copyright of this book. Even the standard of choosing the authorized customers could be described as picky. For a time, no one could satisfy Yang Yi. However, the animation of fairy tales like Shishi's Bedtime Stories had already begun. Yang Yi and Mantis Shrimp Animation Company reached an agreement. He entered into the game with the copyright and funds to buy 30% of Mantis Shrimp shares. Starting from the story of Snow White, those classic animations were about to be shown to children on TV in this world. In this world, Labor Day was no longer a small holiday. The country paid more attention to traditional festivals. For an important festival like the Qingming Festival, it became the second long holiday in the first half of the year after the Spring Festival. In the middle of April, the Qingming Festival was a 5-day holiday. Shishi's kindergarten was also on holiday. Yang Yi agreed with Shishi before, and the family happily boarded the plane to travel to Australia. Chapter 729. Shanghai Hongqiao International Airport, VIP Lounge. La la la. While waiting for the plane to depart, Shishi was so excited that she couldn't sit still. The little girl ran around the VIP lounge. No one played with her, so the little girl entertained herself. She was humming a tune that came from nowhere. Sometimes she would watch TV, and sometimes she would look at what the waitresses were doing. She was as happy as a bird that had escaped from its cage. Yang Yi sat beside Murphy and watched from afar. He only interfered when Shishi might disturb others. However, this little girl, who was as cute as an angel, didn't make a fuss. The other guests in the VIP lounge all smiled kindly at her. This was the first time that he had brought Tong Tong on a plane. Yang Yi had consulted the airline company and bought a direct flight from Shanghai to Sydney. This way, they could minimize the number of takeoffs and landings. At other times, flying was no problem for the 4-month-old Tong Tong. Even if they were in first class, there would still be delays. Their flight was delayed for an hour. Fortunately, Yang Yi had bought a first-class ticket. They could eat buffet food in the VIP lounge and wait leisurely. Finally, the ground service girl who had come to confirm the flight information came to inform them that it was time to board the plane. Yang Yi called Shishi back. The little girl held her father's hand and became more excited. She chattered, "Papa, now that we're on the plane, will we arrive soon?" Fortunately, Yang Yi was very patient. He patiently explained to Shishi, "There's still a long way to go. It'll take more than 10 hours. It'll take about half a day." The first-class ticket that Yang Yi had bought was a little different from the ordinary first class. It was called box first class. As the name implied, it was a small box with good privacy. There were only 8 box first-class seats on the entire plane. Yang Yi had bought 3 tickets. Compared to the economy cabin, it was obviously much more spacious. There was no overhead luggage rack, so he didn't have to worry about hitting his head due to the small space inside the 2-story plane. The economy class seats were arranged in a 3-4-3 arrangement, while the private rooms were arranged in a 1-2-1 arrangement. The amount of space each person could occupy could naturally be seen through the comparison. Since they were a family, Yang Yi bought 2 seats in the middle and 1 on the right. The partition in the middle could be lowered, so that Shishi could sit next to her mother without worrying about feeling insecure. After boarding the plane through the special passage, Yang Yi and Murphy were still talking to the stewardess. They wanted the stewardess to bring back the small carry-on luggage that they had just placed in the luggage compartment in front of them. Of course, the larger luggage was checked in, because the carry-on luggage contained some necessary baby products such as Tong Tong. At this moment, Shishi was already playing on her seat out of curiosity. Shishi pulled on the door of the private room. There were 2 gates. When one was pulled, the other would automatically close. It was as if she had found a magical mechanism. The little girl let out a soft exclamation of surprise. Humans were always very curious. The more magical the mechanism, the more it would attract people's desire to explore it. Shishi was like that now. She pulled the door open again and sat on the chair. She shook her little feet in boredom. After a while, she looked at the row of buttons on the table inside the seat. There was a joystick handle among them. What is this? Questions arose in the little girl's mind. She couldn't help but try pressing it. She didn't know which one she pressed. Suddenly, the table beside her slowly flipped up. When it started to move, the little girl was shocked. She thought that she had broken something. She hurriedly stood up from her seat and stood aside helplessly. "What's the matter?" Her father's voice suddenly sounded from behind. She was shocked again. The stewardess was very nimble. She had already helped to retrieve it. She even taught Murphy to feed Tong Tong some water or milk from a milk bottle when the plane took off. It was the same principle as adults chewing gum to prevent ear discomfort. Yang Yi didn't have anything to do, so he came over to see what Shishi was doing. The little girl felt that she had done something wrong, and she had been discovered. After getting a shock, she lowered her little head in embarrassment. However, perhaps she still felt that her father wasn't looking at her, so she secretly raised her head. Her big, bright eyes looked at her father evasively. In the end, when her eyes met with her father's smiling eyes, she lowered her head in a panic. Yang Yi was amused. He patted Shishi's head and smiled. "Come sit down. Let's see how these things are controlled." Seeing that her father wasn't angry, Shishi breathed a sigh of relief. Her interest in exploring was rekindled. This time, she wanted to explore with her father. After the little girl sat down, she looked at her father eagerly. The seat was quite spacious. Shishi's little but didn't take up much space, so Yang Yi sat beside Shishi. The two of them squeezed and sat down. He took out an instruction manual from the newspaper and magazine folder near the door. "Look, there's an instruction manual here." Then Yang Yi found the right button and put the upended table back. This way the space was spacious again. "This TV can still be watched." Yang Yi found the button and turned on the LCD screen directly opposite him. The LCD screen was embedded in the board of the private room, and it was at the top of the small sofa at the foot. It was very far away, so Yang Yi didn't have to worry about Shishi's eyesight being affected by the TV. However, it wasn't accurate to say that it was a TV. To be precise, it was an onboard entertainment system that could be controlled through the control panel. The joystick could also be used as a mouse. "I want to see the ugly bunny," Shishi said happily as she shook her father's arm when she saw that the TV was turned on. However, this newly aired cartoon wasn't available. Yang Yi searched for a while and found that there were many movies and TV series, but there were only a few cartoons for children to watch. The father and daughter didn't know how long they explored until the stewardess came over and told Yang Yi to sit tight, as the plane was about to take off. Yang Yi fastened the seatbelt for Shishi and went to check on Murphy. Tong Tong didn't have any big reaction. The little boy was in his mother's arms, and his eyes were wide open. Because the partition was down, he was curiously watching his father and sister fiddling with the shiny screen. It wasn't as troublesome as imagined. During the takeoff, Tong Tong bit the pacifier of his milk bottle and drank warm water. He was very calm until the flight stabilized. Finally, he could move. The stewardess came over and poured a glass of apple juice for Murphy. She looked at Tong Tong and said with a smile, "He's so obedient, and he's as cute as his sister." Sister said, "You're a good baby, good baby." Murphy smiled and reached out to touch Tong Tong's soft little face to tease him. The little boy even grinned, revealing two beautiful little dimples. Shishi couldn't wait to call her father over, and continued to explore the mechanisms with her father. "Look, how long are your father's legs?" Yang Yi whispered to Shishi. Yang Yi sat on the sofa, stretched out his legs, and firmly placed them on the small sofa with two pillows. Needless to say, the space in the middle was very big, and people who weren't tall enough couldn't reach the sofa with their buttocks full of seats. Shishi giggled. She also lifted her long legs, but there was no place for her to put them, so she put them on her father's knees. This simple happiness made the little girl smile so much that her eyes narrowed into two crescent moons. Chapter 730. When they arrived in Sydney, it was around 5 o'clock in the morning local time. However, it was also around 3 o'clock in the morning in Beijing. Cece had a lot of fun on the plane last night. She crawled around her mother's seat and grabbed her father's seat, asking him to play with her. Yang Yi even dug out the dining table to draw and tell stories with the little girl. It was only after 11 o'clock in the morning in Beijing that the little girl fell asleep. Therefore, when they got off the plane, she couldn't get up at all. She looked sleepy. Yang Yi helplessly carried her off the plane. The little girl leaned into her father's warm embrace and fell asleep comfortably on her father's shoulder. "Let's go to the hotel to get rid of the jet lag first. We'll go out at noon." Murphy and Tong Tong went to bed early last night. They were full of energy now. Tong Tong was also in her mother's arms, looking around curiously at the world. It was already autumn in Australia in April. However, the weather was still very mild. The only regret was that the temperature difference between day and night was a little big. When they came out of the airport, it was cold outside. Fortunately, the stewardess reminded them to put on their jackets. However, when the sun rose and it was close to noon, the cloudless blue sky couldn't block out the blazing sun. The temperature was so high that they couldn't wear 2 layers of clothes. Murphy changed Shishi into a thin long dress. "Let's go see the kangaroos." "Papa, let's go see the kangaroos, okay?" The little girl in a printed chiffon dress held her father's hand and said eagerly as soon as they stepped out of the door. Looking at Shishi's expectant eyes, it was obvious that her main purpose of coming to Australia was to see the animals in the photos that Lu Weisha sent her. She wanted to see them with her own eyes. "It's too late today. Let's go to the zoo. It won't be long before the zoo closes. You won't be able to play with the kangaroos for long. We'll go tomorrow." Yang Yi patted his daughter's little shoulder and said with a smile. If they didn't go to the zoo today, where would they go to play? It was very simple. The most famous thing about this city, other than some famous buildings, was its more than 70 charming beaches. Of course, with so many beaches, choosing one was also a problem. Yang Yi and the others went to Manly Beach, which was said to be the most suitable place for the whole family to play together. They took the ferry there, and from the boat, they could also admire the famous shell-like building along the coast. When they passed by, Yang Yi even called Shishi out to take photos of the little girl on the deck. Of course, Murphy was also there. She pushed Tong Tong in a stroller, so she didn't have to carry him all the time. Tong Tong stayed by her father's feet during the photo shoot. In the camera, the sea breeze lifted Mo Fei's hair under her big sun hat. Her hair fluttered in the wind and reflected the golden light in the sun. She looked at Yang Yi with a happy and displeased expression. Every photo was taken as if she was a model in a blockbuster. It was the first time that she was on a boat, so she was actually a little scared, especially on the deck. The little girl was worried that she would be thrown into the sea by the shaking ferry, but she also wanted to be closer to see the boundless sea in the distance. Looking at her holding her father's clothes tightly, her tangled look was so cute. "Papa, are there any big fish here?" Shishi waited for her father to finish taking photos of her mother, then raised her head and asked weakly. "If it's fish there might be, but there shouldn't be any big fish here." Yang Yi shook his head and said, "This place could be regarded as a wedge-shaped bay. Boats came and went. Even if there were big fish, they would have to stay away from these bigger steel beasts." "Okay," the little girl said with some regret. "It doesn't matter. In 2 days we will go to another city. We will take a bigger boat and go out to sea to see the whales. There are also big and beautiful coral reefs." Yang Yi smiled and comforted his daughter. "Okay." Shishi immediately became happy and forgot her initial fear of taking a boat. In less than half an hour, they arrived at their destination. There were many beautiful yachts at the dock, but that was not today's theme. Yang Yi took Murphy through the long and narrow, beautiful streets, past a dazzling variety of shops, and arrived at the beautiful beach. No wonder it was praised by many people. The long beach, the sand was flat and fine. Although there were many tourists, it didn't feel dirty at all. It was clean as if it had never been developed before. The deep blue sea and the blue sky, the blue was clean and pure, so beautiful that it was suffocating. The phrase "the line between the sea and the sky" was quite appropriate here. The deep blue sea seemed to be at the end of the field of vision, and the edge of the white sky, forming a contrasting line. Perhaps it was not the right time, and the waves were not turbulent enough, but there were still white waves rolling layer after layer towards the tourists playing on the beach. The white waves seemed to echo the clean clouds on the horizon. If the picture was reversed, it would be difficult to distinguish which was the waves and which was the clouds. In the afternoon, the temperature on the beach was very high. In addition, the temperature of the sea had always been constant, so there were still many people swimming and playing in the sea. In the distance, there were small speedboats dragging people on surfboards surfing on the sea. Even if the waves were not big at this time, listening to their shouts from afar, it was obvious that they were having a lot of fun. Unfortunately, Yang Yi and Murphy did not plan to go into the water. After all, they had 2 children with them. When Shishi reached the beach, she was very excited. The little girl pulled her father's hand and insisted that her father take her to the sea. She wanted to swim in the sea, but she was also a little scared, so she stepped on the waves on the shore. The little girl, who was wearing a long dress, held her dress with her hands. When the waves rolled up the white foam and hit her, she screamed and dodged. When the water slowly receded, the little girl chased after the waves like a general who had won a battle, giggling and stepping on the receding water line. However, the next wave came back, and she screamed and dodged again. Her bare feet left small footprints on the wet beach. Wearing sunglasses and holding a camera, Yang Yi stood by the side and watched. Looking at his daughter's smiling face, the calm Yang Yi also revealed a gentle smile. Murphy, with Kitty in her arms, also slowly walked over on the sand. Tong Tong was in his mother's arms. He seemed to be very interested in the blue color. The little guy opened his big eyes and looked at the distant sea and the sky. His small mouth was slightly open, and he looked like he was in a daze. No one knew what he was thinking. "Little brother, it's so fun here." This time, Shishi did not dodge the waves. Her little feet were caught in the foam of the waves. The little girl was not in a hurry. She excitedly stepped on the water and shouted to Tong Tong. However, Tong Tong was attracted by the sea and did not pay attention to her. Stepping on the waves and strolling on the beach, they enjoyed a leisurely time. Of course, it was still tiring to walk on the soft sand. After playing for about an hour, Yang Yi and the others sat at a beach bar to take a break. This beach bar was a big tent with a sunshade, but there were no walls on all sides, so the people sitting inside could enjoy the cool and comfortable feeling while also looking at the blue sky and blue sea. Yang Yi and Murphy did not drink. Fortunately, the bar also sold fruit juice. They sat on the beach chairs and drank the cold fruit juice on the wooden table. The tiredness disappeared without a trace. Shishi was originally a little tired, but the little girl drank the fruit juice for a while and recovered her exuberant energy. She restlessly moved around on the beach chair and even stuck out her little butt. She leaned on the beach chair and watched someone play the guitar and sing. The person playing the guitar and singing was a white guy. However, he was not a professional performer but a local tourist who came to play. He even brought a guitar with him. On this romantic beach, he played and sang for his female companion. To be honest, this guy's singing was indeed average in the eyes of professional singers like Yang Yi, but he sang very passionately. Under his enthusiasm, it was also very infectious. The surrounding customers in the bar also whistled and cheered for the guy. "It's so romantic," Mo Fei whispered enviously. Yang Yi looked at Murphy, who was holding Tong Tong. Suddenly, his vision went back to 2 years ago. It was around this time that he met Murphy for the first time in the dark tube-shaped apartment. At that time, Murphy was arrogant and cold like a black swan, which made him feel disgusted. But at that time, he did not know that arrogance was just a way for Murphy to protect herself in the face of the cruel society. Later, under his company, Murphy removed this disguise. Although she was still a little cold and introverted, she became gentle and considerate. He also did not know that the arrogant black swan was now the mother of his 2 children. Now she was holding Erwa and sitting next to him. The 2 of them were as loving as before, inseparable as a shadow. 2 years passed in the blink of an eye. In Yang Yi's sigh, the singing guy finished singing. In the cheers of the crowd, he received a kiss from his female companion. Yang Yi suddenly had an inspiration. He smiled, put the cup on the table, got up and walked to the white guy. Chapter 731. Murphy didn't notice Yang Yi suddenly getting up because she was still watching the commotion. However, a familiar figure suddenly appeared in her field of vision. He walked towards the Caucasian guy, and Murphy immediately guessed what Yang Yi was going to do. Mo Fei was surprised and overjoyed. She was still holding little mommy, so she could only use her free hand to cover her slightly opened lips that she couldn't control herself. Yang Yi and the Caucasian guy talked for a while, and the happy Caucasian guy enthusiastically handed his guitar to Yang Yi. Then, the 2 of them even cupped their fists and bumped shoulders like men. "God bless you, my brother." Murphy could hear the Caucasian guy shouting excitedly. All the tourists in the bar were still discussing the Caucasian guy with relish. Now that they saw the guy shouting and an Asian man borrowing a guitar, they knew that there was going to be a lively scene again. Immediately, cheers and whistles rose and fell one after another. At the bar next to them, the bartender girl in a bikini also picked up her phone with great interest and used her phone's camera to record. She only filmed half of the Caucasian guy's courtship. She was regretting that if she could film the whole thing, she would have something to brag about to her friends. The enthusiasm of the onlookers didn't scare Yang Yi. He also mingled overseas in his previous life, so he knew that foreigners weren't so reserved. He also smiled, raised his guitar, and said loudly, "Friends, now I'm going to sing a song for my wife to remember when we met. Her beauty and my heart moved." Yang Yi said it vaguely. Murphy might have thought that Yang Yi was referring to 7 years ago, but he was actually talking about 2 years ago. But it didn't matter. The onlookers all looked at Murphy, saw her and the 2 children, and offered their kind laughter and applause. "She's pretty, right? Among Asians, I think she's very beautiful." A girl asked her companion. "Her husband is very handsome. He's tall, has a good figure and a cool face." It had to be said that Yang Yi's face might not be considered handsome in China, but among foreigners with a strong 3-dimensional face, he was indeed a handsome guy. Moreover, with his long, strong thighs and slightly open shirt that revealed some strong chest muscles, it really looked like it could stimulate women's hormones. Maybe, but the aesthetics of Asians might be a little different from ours. Her companion wasn't so fascinated. She was very interested in the love between Yang Yi and his wife, but at least, they've been in love for many years. Look at these two cute children. Their relationship is obviously very stable. This is enviable. Amidst the laughter of the crowd, Yang Yi pulled the strings of the guitar and gently patted it and started playing. Note 1. The lively and cheerful melody was like a cool sea breeze blowing from nature. It immediately relaxed people's restless minds and grabbed people's ears tightly. Everyone closed their mouths at the same time. The beach bar became quiet, and only the sound of Yang Yi's performance could be heard. Murphy sat at the table and listened. Just the prelude had already made her look forward to it. She definitely hadn't heard this song before. This bastard secretly prepared another surprise. The beautiful woman's eyes wandered, and she bit her red lips lightly, looking angry and happy. Well, you don't and... Yang Yi's opening made Murphy even more surprised. She didn't expect Yang Yi to prepare an English song. Although the song Let It Go that Yang Yi first sang to she was an English song, he hadn't composed an English song in the past 2 years. Of course, Murphy didn't doubt Yang Yi's ability. She felt that with Yang Yi's talent and his proficiency in English, it shouldn't be a problem for him to create an English song. However, Murphy couldn't figure it out. When did this guy have the time to secretly write an English song? Murphy didn't know that Yang Yi liked this song very much in his previous life, and now it was completely at his fingertips. But this smart and stupid woman wouldn't be entangled in some insignificant problems. If she couldn't figure it out, then she wouldn't think about it. Listen to the song. From the beginning of the prelude, the melody had been very beautiful, and Mo Fei also understood the lyrics. I tried to be as cold as ice, but your passion melted this layer of camouflage, breaking through the cracks of the camouflage, and looking outside, this feeling is wonderful. Now I have to try my best to hide my infatuation. While I can still pretend to be a cold and handsome guy, I have to show my most handsome side. Such straightforward lyrics, such a straightforward confession. Murphy couldn't help but blush as she listened to the laughter of the tourists around them. Suddenly, she remembered 2 years ago, when Yang Yi's personality changed. He and she were both ice cold, but this guy's temper was so bad. But now this confession made Murphy's heart beat wildly. She was secretly happy, but also embarrassed, because she felt that her feelings for Yang Yi back then were actually the same as Yang Yi's feelings for her. It turned out that the two of them were unknowingly attracted to each other. The surrounding tourists didn't know Murphy's thoughts. They were still laughing softly, and their eyes were full of admiration. Yang Yi's song was indeed good, but until now, no one had recognized that Yang Yi's song was original. They just thought that it was a very good song that they had never heard before. Or maybe someone else had. But now, the shy and introverted Chinese in their impression was actually singing such a straightforward song in front of so many people to express his love. This inspired their admiration and enthusiasm for Yang Yi. It seemed that Yang Yi was like them, a person who loved this world. This song was naturally not only straightforward lyrics and a moving melody, but some of its phrases also had a kind of magic that made people want to sway with it. Especially after Yang Yi's affectionate the song entered the chorus stage with a brighter rhythm. Although there was no drum accompaniment, the clear pronunciation, rhyming and strong rhythm of the lyrics still made the onlookers in the beach bar unable to help but raise their hands, twist, and sway along with the song. Of course, the biggest impact on Murphy was the strong emotion expressed in the lyrics. Yang Yi was gently twisting his guitar, looking at Murphy affectionately as he sang. Are you willing to take 2 more steps forward? Are you willing to come closer to me? Darling. Then I will gently bite your ear. Even the open and enthusiastic foreigners couldn't help but grin at this blatant teasing. And when the thin-skinned Murphy heard it, her blush, as if she had drunk alcohol, spread directly to her white jade-like earlobes and neck. Nice, man. Behind Yang Yi, the white guy who lent the guitar to Yang Yi waved his fist excitedly. Then he and his girlfriend looked at each other and smiled. Following this passionate feeling, they kissed. When Yang Yi repeated this paragraph again. But I won't hesitate no more, no more, but I won't hesitate no more, no more, no more. Some enthusiastic tourists couldn't help but sing along. No more, no more. These lyrics were too easy to pronounce. The melody was still so moving. If it weren't for Yang Yi's sudden and personal confession, there might be a few hot bikini girls who would be willing to stand up and twist their waists to dance for this song. But Yang Yi was still as affectionate as ever. He only had Murphy in his eyes. He emotionally sang the last part of the song. It doesn't need to be complicated, because our time is short. This is our destiny, I'm yours. Later, Yang Yi didn't hum endlessly like the original singer. He straightforwardly ended the song with a moving melody. Just when Yang Yi and Murphy were still looking at each other affectionately, the tourists in the beach bar couldn't help but laugh and jeer. Kiss. Kiss. He had already sung such a passionate song. How could he be so reserved now? He had to have a beautiful ending. Chapter 732. When her father was singing, she turned around like before. Her butt was facing her mother, and her two small hands were on the back of the beach chair. Her big eyes were sparkling as she watched her father's performance with rapt attention. When she heard the upbeat part, the little girl couldn't help but twist around on the beach chair. Luckily, Murphy was holding onto the chair's armrest. Otherwise, Cece would definitely twist herself in the beach chair and fall down. Although her father had finished singing, the enthusiasm of the surrounding tourists still infected Shishi. The little girl sat on her legs and held onto the armrest with both hands. She looked up at her father and giggled. Hee hee. Hee hee. Yang Yi didn't care about the little girl at this time. He looked at Murphy affectionately. When the surrounding tourists' cheers reached a boiling point, he looked around and smiled at Murphy. The two of them could be said to be introverted, but they could also be said to be generous and unruly. After all, Mo Fei grew up in the United States, and Yang Yi did not have a fixed place in his previous life, so he was exposed to more foreign cultures. Yang Yi walked over gracefully, gently wrapped his long arms around Mo Fei, who had stood up, and held her together with little Hua Hua in his arms. In the cheers of the crowd, he kissed Mo Fei's cherry lips affectionately. Ooh! The surrounding tourists shouted as if they wanted to see the world in chaos. The girl at the bar also had a smile on her face. She raised her phone and focused on the pair of well-matched couples. Of course, in front of so many people, Murphy was still a little shy. As they kissed, her ears turned red. Yang Yi wasn't too aggressive. He only touched her lightly. However, she couldn't hold back. How could her father only kiss her mother, and not Shishi? The little girl in a long dress stepped on the beach chair and appeared in front of the tourists. She shook her thin and long arms, and her delicate little face was full of excitement. She shouted, "Papa, there's still me." Yang Yi smiled. He held Murphy with one hand and Shishi's legs with the other. He hugged the little girl who was about to fall to his side and kissed her forehead. This loving scene fell into the eyes of all the tourists. They were finally satisfied, and they cheered and applauded enthusiastically. After a while, the hubbub died down. After all, on this beautiful beach, it would be abnormal if confessions didn't happen 17 or 18 times a day. Please give me 4 bottles of beer. Yang Yi didn't forget to return the guitar to the white guy. He also took a few bottles of beer from the bar for him and his female companion. You sang very well. When the bikini bar girl handed over the beer, she didn't forget to stand on tiptoe. She squeezed her 2 elbows on the bar and winked at Yang Yi. Unfortunately, Yang Yi acted as if he didn't see it. He just smiled faintly and left with the wine. Awesome, man. The white guy still clasped his fist and bumped Yang Yi's shoulder. He smiled and said to Yang Yi. Yang Yi chatted with him for a while. When he left, the white guy still couldn't forget to ask Yang Yi, "Brother, what's the name of the song you just sang? It's really good." Yang Yi turned back and smiled. The name of the song is I'm Yours. Although Yang Yi told the other party the name of the song, the white guy was probably going to be disappointed. This song didn't exist on any of the current music websites. After returning to Murphy's side, they could finally continue to enjoy the leisurely afternoon. However, Murphy's eyes were filled with a strange look. Yang Yi saw it and grabbed her hand. He crossed his fingers and smiled. What are you thinking about? Murphy glanced at her daughter. She didn't look at them. The little girl was very interested in a group of big brothers and big sisters playing beach volleyball on the beach. Murphy retracted her gaze. She pursed her lips and whispered to Yang Yi. I realize that you're still very popular abroad. Why is there a hint of jealousy in your words? Yang Yi teased with a smile. Murphy gently bit her lips. Because of the juice, her red lips were stained with a little glossy luster. She looked very attractive at the moment. It's the truth. Look, the bartender lady just now was flirting with you. Was it nice? What was nice? Yang Yi was dumbfounded. What do you think? Murphy snorted softly. She saw that the bikini beauty was squeezing her breasts so hard that they were about to burst. How dare I look? I only have eyes for you. Yang Yi cleverly chose to say sweet words. Murphy was a little happy. However, Murphy, who was a little insecure, still felt a sense of crisis. At this time, she realized that Yang Yi wasn't a very handsome guy in China. However, when placed abroad, he was a real handsome guy. Yang Yi's face, which was slightly masculine among Asians, was just right in the eyes of foreigners. He wasn't feminine or too rough. He was the template of a handsome guy. No wonder, when Yang Yi was singing, the ones who shouted the loudest were the female tourists. Okay, don't worry. Yang Yi took Murphy's hand and smiled gently. He said, didn't I sing for you just now? I'm undersayers. I'm yours. Murphy was touched, but this insecurity also inspired some of her fighting spirit. Murphy gently bit her lower lip again and looked at Yang Yi with seductive eyes. She whispered, I'm not worried. I'm just thinking, what's so good about other people? When we get back to the hotel, I'll show you more. Looking at Murphy's fighting spirit, like a proud little swan, Yang Yi's mouth was dry. Some people were on vacation, some had to work overtime. At Xingyao Production Company, far away in Xiangnan, Luo Jinting, who had just been promoted to deputy general manager, was having a meeting with the company's production team. The ratings of High Energy Challenge are still declining. The company has decided to launch Life in Disguise as soon as possible to take over High Energy Challenge, which will end in May. However, just relying on the past won't solve the problem. If we want to achieve results, we still have to have our own innovative programs. Luo Jinting said ambitiously. But President Luo, innovation isn't that simple. Didn't the few programs that our department thought of not get approved? The manager of the production team said tactfully. The company put too many resources on the 2 new programs. Everyone's enthusiasm has been greatly affected. That was in the past. Now, I'm here to change the situation, Luo Jinting said with some passion. But don't use the old plans to fool me. For an innovative program, you have to consider the market orientation. What's the most popular variety show in the market now? Luo Jinting said. Although he was a little unwilling, the manager of the production team still stammered. It's The Limit Challenge by China Star Productions. Extremely Picky had already overturned the entire television industry. The brand new reality show gameplay and excellent reputation had attracted more and more attention from the audience. This was also why their company's High Energy Challenge had been getting colder and colder ever since it was broadcasted. Everyone had watched Extremely Picky, so how could they still be interested in a reality show filmed in a studio with ordinary people performing? Then study The Limit Challenge. Well, for me, dig out the reason why it became popular and the elements that made it popular. We'll make a program like this ourselves. Luo Jinting seemed to have forgotten how he had suspected The Limit Challenge of plagiarizing High Energy Challenge in the past. But isn't this plagiarism? Someone could not help but ask. Are you stupid? Who told you to copy their entire program? What I mean is, outside of the scope of plagiarism, we'll learn from their strengths and make our own program with our own characteristics. However, we have to ride on the popularity of The Limit Challenge. Understand? Luo Jinting said with disappointment. Understood. The manager of the production team hurriedly agreed. I'll go back and talk to them properly. Watch The Limit Challenge more. It's our opponent, but it's also our hope. Luo Jinting nodded in satisfaction. Chapter 733. The main purpose of their trip to Australia was to satisfy Shishi's wish to see kangaroos. Therefore, early the next morning, Yang Yi and the rest took the ferry to Tarona Zoo on the other side of the river. The zoo was located on a small hill. Looking from afar, the dense greenery was a stark contrast to the steel and concrete forest in the metropolis that Yang Yi and the rest had come to. It wasn't easy to have such a large area that could accommodate wild animals in a major international city. For convenience's sake, as well as to not miss out on the opportunity to have close contact with Australia's native wild animals, Yang Yi hired a tour guide when he bought the tickets. After chatting with her for a while, Yang Yi found out that this female tour guide was a graduate of the University of Queensland. She was actually a tour guide with such high academic qualifications? This made Yang Yi and Murphy extremely surprised. However, seeing how she was smiling at Fang Yan, perhaps she was also interested in the tour and was enjoying it. However, tour guides were generally unscrupulous. This female tour guide led Yang Yi and his family into the park and into the souvenir shop. Wow! A giraffe! The moment Shishi entered, she couldn't move her feet. She held her father's hand excitedly and walked toward a one-scale giraffe plush doll. It's really beautiful. Murphy couldn't help but walk over with Tong Tong in her arms. She looked up at the giraffe's head and said with a smile, "Hubby, look, there are even leaves in its mouth. It's so exquisitely made." Wasn't that right? The leaves were all made of cloth, but the craftsmanship was equally exquisite. The fur was dense, and its legs were long and sturdy. Even the markings on the giraffe's body were different from others. The more one looked at it, the more beautiful it felt. "Daddy, I want this." Shishi hugged the giraffe's leg. In front of this huge creature, she was as small and weak as a kitten in front of a human. However, the young lady didn't mind at all. Her eyes sparkled as she looked at her father with anticipation. Buy it home, buy it home. This was the only thought in the young lady's mind. We can't bring this back even if we buy it. Yang Yi's heart almost softened when he saw his daughter's pitiful little eyes when she was begging. However, there was really nothing he could do about it. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he said, "Look at how big it is. How can we bring such a big giraffe onto the plane? Don't you think so?" "Woo, no, I want a giraffe." Shishi pouted as she twisted her head and said sadly. It was the first time that Shishi had seen such a big plush doll. She was so excited that she couldn't think about what her father had said. She even saw this big giraffe and was unwilling to look at the short tiger and elephant beside it. Plush dolls, especially large ones, were no less attractive to women than golden coins were to dragons. Murphy also touched the giraffe plush toy reluctantly. It was not easy for her to overcome her desire to buy it. She patted Shishi's shoulder on behalf of Yang Yi, who was smiling bitterly, and said softly, "Let's go look at something else, okay? Something else might be more interesting." No, I want this. "Papa, can you buy this for me?" Shishi looked at her father pitifully. However, her father had no choice. "We'll buy it when we get back. There's also a giraffe in the mall near home." Yang Yi could only coax Shishi. "We don't have it at home." The little girl was almost 6 years old, and wasn't so easy to coax. She pouted and shook her head in disagreement. "Yes, Dad can get someone to make it for you. Dad knows a factory." Yang Yi had an idea and said to Shishi, "Make it exactly like this. Dad promises you that I'll get someone to make it for you when we get back." This time, Yang Yi was not coaxing Shishi. Although he didn't know a factory, he had always wanted to buy a toy factory. Now that the work of adapting fairy tales into cartoons had begun, he needed to start investing in such a factory to produce peripheral products. This was a very important income, and it was also related to shaping the image of the characters in fairy tales, and laying a solid foundation for the amusement park in the future. Since he planned to buy a factory, it was not a big deal to get a large plush toy for Shishi. What's more, Yang Yi also liked Murphy very much. "Shishi, come and see. There are penguins and small giraffes here. This is even cuter." Murphy's voice came over. She stood next to a shelf and pointed at the mini plush toys on the shelf and smiled. "We can buy this. It's only this big, so it's easier to carry around." After getting her father's promise, Cece finally let go of the giraffe reluctantly. Moreover, The mini plush toy over there was indeed an indescribable sense of adorableness. The little girl skipped over and picked it up with her mother. Looking at Murphy and his daughter's smiling faces, Yang Yi was slightly relieved. He asked the tour guide casually, "How much is this giraffe?" Just now Yang Yi and Shishi were communicating in Chinese, so the tour guide just stood there blankly. This time Yang Yi used English so the tour guide understood. She waved her hand and smiled. "This is for exhibition only. We're not selling it." Through the incident with the giraffe, Yang Yi suddenly realized that his daughter was not so perfect. The little girl was still like other children. She had a persistent pursuit of what she wanted. This spirit was commendable, but if it evolved into a bad habit of pestering and crying to achieve her goals, that was not what Yang Yi wanted to see. Although Yang Yi was willing to satisfy all of his daughter's requests, he also had the ability to let Shishi buy whatever she wanted. But too much pampering was not a good thing. So when Shishi and Murphy finished choosing the souvenirs they wanted to buy, Yang Yi stopped them. "We can't buy them now." "Why?" Shishi asked, puzzled. "Because we still have to go to the zoo. Don't you want to see real kangaroos and giraffes?" Yang Yi smiled. "It won't be too late to buy them after we finish looking around. But, I want to buy them now." The little girl pouted and was a little unhappy. She was a little reluctant. "If you want to buy them, that's fine. But during this process you have to be responsible for carrying them. You can't let Mom and Dad help you. Mom has to take care of your brother, and Dad has to carry things and take photos of you." Yang Yi smiled. "You make the decision. Do you want to buy them now, or wait until we finish looking at the kangaroos and giraffes?" As he spoke, Yang Yi signaled Murphy not to interfere with him with his eyes. Murphy was actually a little confused, but she knew that Yang Yi loved his daughter more than she did. He must have his reasons for doing so. Shishi did not expect that her father deliberately made this difficult problem for her. The little girl looked at the plush toy in her hand reluctantly for a while, but finally nodded. "What do you mean by nodding?" Yang Yi's voice was still very gentle, but he did not give in at all. "Are you saying that you want to play with Mom and Dad, and then go down the mountain to buy them? Or do you want to buy them now and hold them yourself?" "I want to buy them now. I'll hold them myself," the little girl said energetically. She did not feel that there was anything strange about it. Instead, she smiled sweetly as if she had made a good decision to help her parents. "Okay," Yang Yi said in his heart. "The test begins." Chapter 734. Quokka. Quokka. Strolling along the zoo's quiet path, Shishi's pleasant voice was like a cheerful lark jumping and singing among the towering trees. Yang Yi was carrying a bag and walking beside Murphy. In front of them, the little girl was jumping happily, carrying a big zoo shopping bag in one hand and a short-tailed kangaroo plush toy in the other. She was happily calling its name. The short-tailed kangaroo was indeed very cute. Its chubby cheeks, sweet smile, and its habit of loving close contact with humans made it a little fellow that everyone loved. In particular, a small short-tailed kangaroo had curiously and happily taken a selfie in front of the camera. When the video was uploaded to the internet, people could see its charmingly naive appearance, chubby little face, and intimate smile. All of a sudden, this cute creature had become an internet celebrity all over the world. Shishi liked this plush toy very much. It was like a giraffe and she wouldn't let go once she hugged it. Yang Yi didn't interfere and let her hold on to it. After all, it was also a kind of test. We are now in a reptile museum. Australia is rich in reptile resources. The highly educated female tour guide kept introducing the place. At first, Yang Yi and Murphy didn't realize what was going on. But, after they entered, they were greeted by a green lizard under the light and leaves. Looking around, there were lizards of different shapes and sizes, turtles, frogs, and even a coiled python. Ah! Murphy was stunned for a moment, and suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. She turned around and hid behind Yang Yi with Tong Tong in her arms. She shivered and said, "Why is it this kind of thing? I hate lizards the most. Hubby, can we go? Let's not look at this, okay?" She didn't have any reaction to the reptiles, but she was frightened by her mother. She thought that something had happened, so she grabbed her father's clothes in a panic and wanted to hide. All right, let's not look at this. Yang Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He called the tour guide and asked her to take them around the reptile museum to see other animals. It's really a pity. These animals are very cute. When the tour guide took them to the local animal museum, she couldn't help but feel sorry for them. It seemed that women were different. Many women had a natural fear of reptiles, but some women found them cute. It was much more fun at the local animal museum. The bright sun shone on the small outdoor parks, man-made stone mountains and planted trees. One by one, native Australian animals appeared in front of Yang Yi and the others. Suddenly, there was a feeling of too much for the eye to take in. Papa, is this a piglet? As if she had discovered a new continent, She happily pointed at a wombat that looked simple and honest and moved slowly and leisurely. No, this is a wombat, Yang Yi said to his daughter, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He felt that if the wombat could understand Shishi's words, it would cry out, "Do I look like a pig? Don't you see that I have a bear-like fur?" When the tour guide saw that Yang Yi and the others' attention was on the wombat, she came over to introduce it. It was not a boring introduction to science. She talked about a lot of interesting facts about wombats, such as the wombat's poop, which was the only square poop in the world. Shishi looked at the wombat for a while, and then looked at the young lady for a while. She was fascinated. The little girl could understand most of the English, but there were some professional terms that she couldn't understand. Yang Yi consciously translated a few more difficult words for her. Of course, the young lady's introduction made Shishi more interested in this cute wombat. "Papa, why didn't it poop? Can we see it poop before we go?" Shishi was still reluctant to move. "Then we have to wait for 14 days. Murphy couldn't help but laugh. She also listened carefully to the tour guide's introduction, and knew that it took 14 days for the wombat to digest its food. In the end, Shishi couldn't wait any longer, because it was time for them to see the cuter koala. There were limited tickets to get close to the koala. Fortunately, Yang Yi and the others came early and bought the tickets in time under the tour guide's reminder. Shishi carried the handbag and followed her father excitedly. The little girl's perseverance was a bit beyond Yang Yi's expectations. He originally thought that Shishi would be impatient after carrying the bag for a while, but she had been carrying it for more than half an hour, and climbed the mountain with the adults all the time without saying that she was tired. This performance made Yang Yi surprised, but at the same time, he also felt a little gratified. However, he still wanted to see where Shishi's limit was. Shishi didn't know that her father was still scheming against her. The little girl followed her mother's finger, and saw the koala sleeping in the branches of the tall eucalyptus tree. "So cute!" The little girl couldn't help but murmur. Her beautiful eyes seemed to reflect the bright sunshine, revealing a happy expression. The koala was really cute. It had a big nose, thick lower lip, and a pair of sleepy eyes that couldn't open. It was so cute that people's hearts were about to be melted by it. It was indeed a good time to sleep under the warm sun, but the thick hair on the koala's body looked very much like the cotton of the quilts used by the poor in the past. And it was the kind that had been used for a long time. They needed to find a few masters, draw a bow, and shoot. However, with the koala's habits, which were similar to that of a sloth, even if they shot it, it would probably take a long time before it cried out. Of course, since the koala was so cute, it was better not to bully it. Shishi looked at the koala with little stars in her eyes. If she didn't know that it was impossible, she would probably want to take this cute thing home. Even if she couldn't take it home, she could still hug it. It was just that koalas slept most of the time, and the zoo arranged for them to work very short hours. For example, a young koala would only work for 10 minutes a day, and an adult koala would not work for more than half an hour. Moreover, every 3 days they worked, they would have a day off. No one else could receive such treatment. So when it was time for them to work, there were already many people queuing up. Fortunately, Yang Yi and the others came early. The tour guide took the 3 tickets that Yang Yi handed over, and took them to go through the procedures for entering the cage. It wasn't very complicated. They just needed some training. A zookeeper came and taught them how to hold the koala. Tree, you have to think that you are a eucalyptus tree. Pretend that you are a eucalyptus tree. Hee hee. Shishi listened to the strange pronunciation and couldn't help but smile. Listen carefully and respect others. Murphy looked over sternly, and the little girl became more obedient. Shishi could hold the young koala. When the young koala woke up, it was also in a daze. Its two protruding ears finally opened, and it looked extremely cute. Shishi, who had been in contact with animals since she was a child, was not afraid to hold the koala. Moreover, when the young koala was pulled into Shishi's arms, it grabbed the clothes on Shishi's shoulders by itself. Just like a human child, it was very dependent on Shishi's embrace. Papa, Papa, look! Shishi cried out happily. Perhaps the young koala had also triggered Shishi's protective feelings. The little girl didn't move. The sun shone on her little face, and it was as bright as her smile. Yang pressed the shutter in time, and took a picture of this loving scene. Just then, the young koala turned its head and happened to be facing the camera. The young koala's somewhat confused and honest face, and Shishi's sweet smiling face were all recorded. Unfortunately, Shishi's holding of the koala was also very short. After only 3 minutes, the zookeeper came over and took the young koala away. The little girl looked at the young koala reluctantly. She hadn't had enough yet. However, the zookeeper was not her father. He was a bit dignified like a teacher. Shishi didn't dare to entangle with him. She could only return to her father's side and look at him enviously. When Mo Fei went to hold the koala, Yang Yi helped to hold little Momo. However, the little guy, who was not sensible yet, seemed to feel threatened by the happy smile on his mother's face when she was holding the koala. He turned his head, looked at it for a while, stretched out a small hand, and began to babble to his mother. How can you hold another little thing? You don't want your cutest baby anymore? Look at Tong Tong's puckered up. He was so wrong that he was about to cry. This little guy, he hadn't grown up yet, but he had already learned how to be jealous. Fortunately, Murphy could only hold the koala for 3 minutes. She returned the koala and took back Tong Tong. Otherwise, Tong Tong would definitely rebel. After a while they came out of the koala's cage. Shishi was still a little unsatisfied. She looked back 3 times with every step. She was reluctant to leave this cute thing. When they left, they had to go to the locker to take back the things that they couldn't bring into the cage before. However, when Yang Yi handed Shishi's bag of plush toys to her, the little girl shrank her little hand behind her back. Chapter 735. Yang Yi handed the bag of plush toys to Shishi, thinking that the energetic little girl would take it without hesitation. However, he saw that Shishi hid her little hand behind her back. In order to hide her little hand, the little girl stuck out her belly, and her 2 braids hung in front of her chest. She blinked her big bright eyes, as if she wanted to say something, but stopped. What? Don't you want it? Yang Yi asked amused. Papa, help me take it. Shishi's tone was a little hesitant, but it was a statement. Why? Didn't we agree that you'd be responsible for holding it until we're done with the zoo? Yang Yi's lips curled up slightly as he pretended to be confused. Oh, Papa, help me take it. Shishi frowned slightly, and said sadly and pitifully, I have been holding it for a long time. Yang Yi almost couldn't stand his daughter's soft and cute pleading. However, there were some things that Shishi still needed to understand. Yang Yi shook his head and said, That won't do. You see, Papa doesn't have free hands to take things. Moreover, you promised me that you would help me take it at the foot of the mountain. You can't break your promise. Look, your little brother is looking at you. If you break your promise, he will think, Sister, shame, shame, shame. After hearing what her father said, Shishi subconsciously looked at Tong Tong, who was in her mother's arms. The little guy seemed to have a reaction to being called little brother. He turned his little head and looked at his father, who had said a lot. I can't lose face in front of my little brother. We are big sisters. Shishi pursed her lips, but she still toughened up. She reluctantly reached out her little hand and said, Okay, I'll take it. However, a child's mood came and went quickly. When they saw the real giraffe later, Cece, who had become a little fangirl of this big guy that was several meters tall, completely forgot her grievances just now. She held the bag with one hand and waved excitedly at the big guy with the other hand. The little girl was so happy that it was as if she had met an old friend. However, the giraffe ignored her. These big guys were enjoying the best scenery in the zoo. Their heads were held high as they nibbled on the leaves hanging in cages. At the same time, they were leisurely looking at the famous buildings such as the Opera House on the other side of the mountain. Shi, who was only a meter tall, and Yang, who was almost 2 meters tall, were dwarfs in front of them. Naturally, the scenery in the bay was not as beautiful as it was. Later on, Shi also saw many Australian animals, such as an ostrich-like emu, a short kangaroo, and a short-tailed kangaroo that slept with its head on its tail. Unwilling to show its charm to Shi finally, the little girl saw her real target, a big kangaroo with long legs, long arms, and a long tail. Papa Kangaroo Kangaroo. The little girl recognized the big kangaroo she had seen in the photos. She turned around happily, pulled her father's hand, and pulled him over. Her voice was clear and crisp. Yang smiled and said, "Come, stand here. This angle is good. Papa will take a few photos of you and the kangaroo." After all, kangaroos were not as docile as koalas. The tourists could only watch them through the cage and take photos through the cage. Even so, Cece couldn't help but ask her father to take a few more photos of her. Looking at the little girl's happy smile in the photos, revealing 2 rows of white teeth, it was even brighter than the sun at noon. After taking the photos, Shishi's excitement gradually subsided. She calmed down and carefully observed the kangaroo in the cage. The kangaroo in the cage was lazily lying on the sand, basking in the sun. Perhaps it felt Shishi's gaze. It pricked up its ears, turned its head, and squinted its eyes at the little girl. I'm not interested. I'm not a poop picker." The kangaroo turned its head and continued to lie on the sand bitterly, basking in the sun and sleeping in. Of course, in Shishi's view, there was another explanation for the kangaroo's expression. The little girl pulled her father's hand and said worriedly, "Papa, why is the kangaroo unhappy?" "Because it's in the cage." "How can it be happy?" Yangi said. "Why is it unhappy in the cage?" Shishi asked, puzzled. "It's not free in the cage. For example, Shishi, will you be happy if you go to kindergarten?" Yangi asked. "Children should not like to go to school, right?" However, Shishi said matter-of-factly, "I'll be happy. If I go to kindergarten, I can play with Chi-Chi, Lu Weisha, and the others." Right, his daughter was a little different from ordinary people. "Well, let's not talk about kindergarten." Yangi had to change an example. For example, if Papa keeps you at home, you can't play with Bao Bao, Xiao Guai, and the others, and you can't go out and play with Xi and Air, or other children. Will you be unhappy? Unhappy? "Papa, don't keep me at home, okay?" Shishi finally nodded. She seemed to understand what her father meant. She looked at her father nervously, worried that what her father said was true. "Papa is just giving an example. Why would I lock you up?" Yangi smiled and patted Shishi's little head. He said, "Through this example, you should be able to understand the kangaroo's feelings. It has no freedom in the cage, and no friends to play with it. It can only be in a daze, so when you see them listless, of course you will be unhappy." However, before Yang Yi's voice died away, 2 big kangaroos had already climbed up and gathered together. They were not going to fight, but were rubbing each other's ears and temples, as if they were communicating with each other. They were really undermining him. Yang Yi just said that they had no friends. Yang Yi was speechless. Fortunately, Shishi did not notice. The kind little girl was worried about the situation of the kangaroos. She frowned and said to her father, "Papa, then will the kangaroos be happy living outside?" At this time, the tour guide was also introducing the current situation of the kangaroos. Yang Yi listened and whispered to his daughter, "You can't say that. Now they are in the zoo. They don't have to worry about food, and there is no danger. They are much more comfortable than living in the wild, but they have lost their freedom. Sometimes, in order to survive, these animals of nature need to make some choices and sacrifices." The little girl looked at her father in confusion. She could not understand this. "When you grow up, you will understand." Yang Yi smiled and did not explain the cruel reality to his daughter. At noon, they ate beef burgers and fries in the zoo's restaurant. The beef burgers were made with a lot of ingredients, but the taste was relatively ordinary. Shi, who was fed by her father's delicious food, only reluctantly ate a little. But taking advantage of this opportunity, she could temporarily get rid of the bag of plush toys that were getting more and more heavy, and have a good rest. Including the afternoon, Shi played in the zoo for almost the whole day. She also saw many animals from other places, such as Japanese hippopotamuses, fishing cats, Sumatran tigers, turkeys, and so on. But when they went down the mountain, no matter how energetic the little girl was, she finally ran out of energy. Shi did not know that. In fact, they could have taken the cable car down the mountain, but the bad father quietly missed that scenic spot and carried out the big test to the end. After walking down the mountain for a while, Shi did not want to walk anymore. The tired little girl was nestled in her father's arms and did not want to move. Dad can carry you, but we have to divide the work. You help Dad continue to carry this bag, okay? Yang Yi smiled and handed the plush toy bag that was destined to leave a deep impression in her memory to Shi. Although the little girl was listless, she still quickly nodded. Being able to let her father carry her down the mountain, she was very comfortable. Although carrying an extra bag was annoying, it was better than walking down the mountain. Yang Yi stuffed the camera bag into his backpack, grabbed Shi with his big hands, and prepared to go down the mountain. However, Yang Yi turned his head and saw Murphy's bitter eyes. Chapter 736. What's wrong? Yang Yi was a little puzzled. Murphy gently puffed up her cheeks and stared at him angrily. After a long time, she faintly said, "I'm tired too." "Yes, as a father, you only know how to test your daughter. You forget that your wife is also carrying a fat son and running around with you." Especially when she saw that her daughter was able to be comfortably carried down the mountain by her father after the test. Murphy's legs were weak, and she still had to continue to take care of Tong Tong, who was sleeping soundly in her arms in the afternoon. She suddenly felt unbalanced in her heart. Now that Shi was sitting on the throne, she seemed to have recovered her spirit. She hugged her father's neck and smiled. She didn't mind watching the fire from the other side of the river. "Tisk, let me carry you. I have good physical strength." Yang Yi used his left hand to hold Shishi's little butt horizontally and stretched out his right hand to Murphy. "Okay. It won't be too tiring to go down the mountain," Murphy said reproachfully and gave Yang Yi a somewhat arrogant look. In fact, Murphy was just complaining. If she really let Yang Yi carry Tong Tong with one hand, she would be reluctant. She was worried that Yang Yi would accidentally drop her son. On the way down the mountain, Shi was stable in her father's arms, as if she was sitting on a sedan chair. As she recovered her energy, she began to talk more. "Papa, when are we going to send letters to Lu Weisha, Xian Air, Qiqi, Shiyun and Nanjiaoyu?" The little girl was still thinking about this matter. She had collected the address, and Yang Yi helped her transcribe and translate it with a small notebook. Perhaps because she saw the kangaroo, Shi remembered that Lu Weisha also sent her a picture of a kangaroo. So she was looking forward to sending letters to her friends as soon as possible. Send letters? Not so soon. We've only been in Australia for 2 days. The day after tomorrow, we're going to take a big boat out to sea. There are beautiful coral reefs, and we might even see whales. Don't you want to take a few more beautiful photos and send them to Lu Weisha and the others? Yang Yi asked with a smile. The camera that Yang Yi brought over, although it was only a SLR camera, it was very convenient to print out photos from a SLR camera in this day and age. It could be done in a few minutes at any photo studio. Moreover, the pixels were clearer than a Polaroid, so he didn't have to worry about his daughter not having any photos when she mailed it. What Dad said made sense. Shi thought for a moment and nodded. At the mention of Lu Weisha, Yang Yi and Shi did not expect that Lu Weisha was not in China at the moment. Taking advantage of the holiday, David's family went back to Sweden. And this time, David unexpectedly received the news that he had been looking forward to for more than a month. In their house, David, who had just returned from the head office, held a symbolic internal company letter and proudly read it in front of his wife. "In view of your excellent performance in the past 2 years in the China branch, We have decided to appoint you as the Senior Vice President of the Market Strategy Research Department of the group. Yes, last time when Yang Yi helped Shishi invite Lu Weisha to dance with her, only her mother brought Lu Weisha along. David was busy applying to the head office for this vacant position. The competition was fierce, but after a long selection process, David succeeded. David, does this mean that we can come back to Sweden? Maria asked excitedly. Yes, Maria, we can stay in our hometown and work. David laughed. But he purposely frowned and said, No, I still need to go back to China because I still have to hand over the work to my successor. But it's okay, we can reunite at home next month, or at the latest next month. Although David had worked in China for 2 years, and had some feelings in Jiangcheng, Sweden was their hometown after all. He did not want to spend too much time with his wife, his family, and his friends of many years. You scared me. Maria was stunned for a moment. She cried and laughed as she threw herself into David's arms. Maria was crying tears of joy, and so was David. He hugged Maria and his heart was filled with emotions. It's a pity that I have just adapted to life in China, and have just made some new friends. Maria calmed down and thought of her life in China for more than half a year. She said with some regret. It's okay. David comforted the sentimental woman. Maria suddenly thought of her daughter, who was playing at her grandparents' house. David, we still have to tell Lu Weisha about this. She likes her classmates in China very much. This news, I don't know how sad she will be. Last year when she went to China from Sweden, she cried for a long time. How would Yang Yi and the rest know about the changes in Lu Weisha's house? Now, Yang Yi was carrying Shishi down the mountain as if he was carrying a koala. After resting comfortably in her father's arms for a while, the little girl regained some of her energy. She could not sit still and began to poke her head out again, wanting to tease Tong Tong who was in her mother's arms. Unfortunately, Tong Tong was sleeping soundly. Shishi, have you rested enough? Murphy looked over with a faint smile and asked her daughter maliciously. Shishi was very smart this time. She seemed to have noticed something and quickly hid in her father's arms so that her mother could not see her. Then she giggled and said, No, I haven't. You sly little girl. Murphy was amused by her. It was just a small hill, not very high, and it was easier to go down the mountain. They were about to walk down. As Yang Yi walked, he seemed to casually mention the bag of plush toys. Shishi, are you tired carrying this bag today? Shishi thought that her father was concerned about her. She pouted and said, It's so tiring. Papa, you didn't even help me carry it. Look, we're back to this souvenir shop. Yang Yi pointed at the shop they were about to pass by and said, Say, if you weren't in a hurry to buy it at that time, you could have bought it back after we came back from the mountain. For example, if you bought it now, you wouldn't have had to carry it so tiring, right? This logic was very simple, but Shishi did not think so far ahead before. Now that her father said it, the little girl's thoughts were suddenly opened. She was suddenly enlightened, but also stunned. That's right. Why not go down the mountain and buy it? When they reached the foot of the mountain, they didn't need to carry Shishi anymore. Yang Yi let Shishi slowly think about this problem by herself. He took the stroller stored in the storage room at the entrance of the zoo to reduce Murphy's burden. Honey, you've worked hard. I'll give you a massage when we go back. Yang Yi smiled and rubbed Murphy's shoulders. You're such a sweet talker. Murphy was happy in her heart, but her mouth was unforgiving. On the ferry back to the opposite shore, Yang Yi and Cece sat side by side on the empty bench. Bathing in the afterglow of the golden autumn sunset in the southern hemisphere, Yang Yi began to talk to Cece about the principles of the world. Do you understand? Papa's suggestion to let you go down the mountain and buy it is the most effective and labor-saving way, right? Yang Yi asked with a smile. Shishi nodded obediently and said, That's why sometimes when you really want something, don't be in a hurry and listen to Papa's opinion. Yang Yi hung his arm on the back of the chair and sat comfortably. Sometimes, Papa will tell you that we can't buy it yet. That means Papa has a reason not to buy it for you. Shishi turned her head and looked at her father in a daze. Sometimes it might be because it's not the right time for us to buy it. Just like when you wanted to buy quokka before going up the mountain. Papa hopes to buy it for you at a more suitable time. It will definitely be good for you and there's no harm in it, right? Of course, it could also be because of other reasons. Either we can't bring it back with us, or it would be a waste if we buy it, or Papa doesn't want you to have something and Papa can't buy it for you. What should you do at that time? Yang Yi turned his head and looked at Shishi as he asked gently. What should I do? The little girl's mouth was slightly open as she asked in confusion. You should listen to Papa and don't stubbornly hold on to what you want. You have to believe in Papa. Papa is doing this for your own good. If Papa can give it to you, Papa will definitely give it to you. Yang Yi gently patted Shishi's little head with his big hand and said with a smile. Don't you think so? The little girl took the opportunity to lean her head on her father's chest. He didn't know if it was because she was tired or because the slightly swaying fairy was like a cradle that lulled people to sleep. At this time, the little girl was as docile as a little koala. Yang Yi put his big hand on his daughter's little shoulder and didn't say anything else. If Shishi could understand, it was just right to stop now. If she didn't understand, there would be plenty of opportunities to continue teaching her in the future. Chapter 737. Yang Yi and the others' trip to Australia went on in an orderly manner. On the third day, they rested for half a day in Sydney because they were too tired from playing in the zoo the day before. Then they arrived in Cairns and checked into the hotel in the evening, which reduced the number of activities they had to play. This was somewhat regrettable, but it was important for a family to be relaxed and happy on a trip. What was this regret? However, Yang Yi, who was busy traveling with his family, did not know that he had quietly become popular on the internet. To be exact, he had become popular on the Western internet. Perhaps she was too excited. 2 days ago, the bar girl posted the video of Yang Yi singing to Murphy on a mainstream Western video website. The name she came up with was quite good. What a beautiful and romantic song. I really wish I was that woman. After the video was uploaded, it received a lot of hits on the same day. Even though it was just a video of an Asian man singing to his wife, the light and moving song, I'm Yours, and the sweet feelings expressed still convinced the audience who accidentally clicked on it. However, at first, the video was only circulated in a small area. The next day, more people watched it, but it did not reach the level of popularity. Many people left comments below, asking the video uploader the name of the song. No one thought that this song was an original by Yang Yi. Even the bar girl did not know. She even forgot to ask Yang Yi the name of the song. The question was not answered. The audience who could not find the original version of the song could not help but recommend the video to their friends and ask them if they had heard the song. Gradually, a bar girl who was not very popular posted a video recorded with a phone that was not very professional. It became more and more popular. On the third day, the editor of the video website found it and recommended it to the front page. Suddenly, the video's views increased exponentially. More and more people saw the video. However, compared to the romantic process of an Asian man singing to his wife, people were more talking about this beautiful love song. What is the name of this song? The video had millions of views, but no one could say the name of this song. Some people were already guessing that this song was an original by the Asian man. However, many people were not willing to believe that the lyrics of this song were written so smoothly. The use of words, word order, and even some small tricks were not inferior to those famous English songwriters. As for the songwriter, people subconsciously thought that it should be a white man, and that he should be an American. This was because the usage of words was not the rap style of black people, and it did not have the noble aura of England. An Asian man? It was hard to convince others with his appearance. Of course, the speculators also provided some evidence. For example, when Yang Yi spoke English, he had a perfect American accent. When Yang Yi played the guitar, there was almost no fault to be found. Another example was Yang Yi singing. There were professional musicians who gave him high praises. This man is definitely a professional singer. He has been trained. And then yes, I like this song. I want to know who he is. What is this song? Bruno Levin. No one would have thought that Bruno Levin's name would appear in the comments section of the video. He was a singer-songwriter in the pop music industry. His songs had squeezed into the American pop music charts many times, and he had also won the Gramophone Award for Best Male Pop Singer. His comments pushed the video to a higher level of popularity. On the fourth day, the number of views of this video had exceeded 30 million, and it had become one of the most popular videos. However, at the same time, no one could find the source of this song. Many people already felt that this song was the original song of the Asian man in the video. Of course, many people heard the news and clicked on the video. They were not attracted by Bruno Levin's doubts. Most of the audience was attracted by this joyous and romantic song played by the guitar. I only secretly replayed the video a few hundred times. Listening to him sing, I almost cried. Yes, the song is romantic, but why am I still single? I really want to find someone to hug. I suddenly understand the title of the video's author. I also want to be that woman. They are so happy. They even have 2 cute children. It was worth mentioning that an Australian national television station found Manly Beach, the bar where he sang, and the Australian girl who uploaded the video. In the interview, the Australian girl described what happened that day to the reporter. In the camera, she had a love-struck look on her face. I don't know. At that time, I was mesmerized by him and his fans. I forgot to ask him the name of the song, and also forgot to ask him where he was from. But from what he and his wife said, he did not seem to be from the United States. Maybe he is Chinese? I don't know. I have never seen such a charming Chinese man. Unfortunately, the reporter could not find the owner of the guitar that the girl mentioned. The young man who successfully wooed the girl was probably also traveling. He probably did not have the time to pay attention to this news. On the 5th day, Yang Yi's trip was coming to an end. That night, they boarded the plane back to China. Finally, there was an American television news report on the most popular video recently. Does anyone know what this song is? At the same time, it also quoted Bruno Levin's comments and the news of an Australian national television station. It was half emotional and half joking, calling for everyone to find the mysterious singer hidden in the sea of people. As soon as the television station broadcast, the video's views increased by leaps and bounds. 50 million, 60 million. Back to the 4th day, the 2nd day of Yang Yi's arrival in Cairns. Early in the morning, after a hurried breakfast, Yang Yi and his family boarded a luxurious 3-story twin-body cruise ship at the dock and set off for Green Island. It was a coral island near the continental shelf with coral reefs and tropical rainforests. The island was indeed very close to the mainland. The cruise ship arrived at their destination in about an hour. In fact, before they arrived at Green Island, Yang Yi could already see the looming coral reefs below through the clear blue-green glass-like sea surface. Wow! It's so beautiful! She was called over by her father. She stood at the edge of the ship with her mother and looked down. The little girl couldn't help but be attracted by the beautiful scene. She couldn't help but mutter to herself. The sea surface is so clean. Murphy couldn't help but sigh. Is it because the coral has a purifying effect on the sea? Yang Yi smiled and explained to Murphy. On the contrary, you should say that it's the cleanliness of the sea water that allows the coral to be preserved. The coral itself has strict requirements for its survival environment. The water temperature, salinity, depth, and light all have requirements. Murky seawater will suffocate them. They can only survive in clean seawater. How do you know so much? Murphy asked in surprise. I did some research. Before I came to Australia, I did a lot of research. I can't just bring you and the children to a foreign country so far away without doing anything, right? That would be too irresponsible. Yang Yi shrugged. He wasn't wrong. Yang Yi didn't understand this knowledge before. He had read the information and memorized it by memory. Chapter 738. Looking down from the high cruise ship, although they could see some coral reefs, it was still a little difficult after all. When the ship sailed, it broke through the waves, blocking a large part of their vision. But when they arrived at Green Island, they got off the ship and walked on the long L-shaped breakwater, and their vision suddenly became open. Papa, can you hold my hand? Although Shishi was holding her father's hand, stepping on the breakwater, which seemed to be floating on the sea, and listening to the sea below washing the pillars of the breakwater, the little girl felt very insecure and said weakly, "Don't let go." Yang Yi was pulling Murphy onto the breakwater. Hearing Shishi's words, he turned his head and saw the little girl's nervous look, so he picked her up. In her father's arms, Shishi's sense of security soared, and she could finally see the beautiful sea. "Papa, where are the big fish?" Shishi turned her head in confusion and asked. "We'll see the big fish in the afternoon on that big boat. Let's play around this island in the morning." Yang Yi smiled and said, "Do you want to see the small fish? They're not as big as whales, but they're also very beautiful, and you can see the coral." Okay. Shishi regained her vitality, hugged her father's neck and laughed. Obviously, seeing the coral reefs on the breakwater was not the best experience. In Yang Yi's customized tour there was a glass-bottom boat project. On the breakwater, they changed to a glass-bottom boat the size of a bus. As the name implied, the bottom of the boat was replaced with transparent glass, and it was a bit like a submarine. The bottom of the boat was very deep in the water. The tourists sat on small benches in the narrow passage in the middle. This seat was definitely uncomfortable, and it was a little crowded, but it didn't matter. The point was that they could look out of the glass windows on the left and right, as if they were also at the bottom of the sea. Shishi was next to her father. As soon as the little girl came in, she was attracted by this magical, underwater world. She didn't have time to sit down, but clung to the glass and looked in surprise. So the bottom of the sea was like this. One stone after another, and then there were many small fish. The scenery here wasn't the most beautiful. When the glass-bottomed boat sailed a little further away from Green Island, and finally stopped on top of a coral reef, a beautiful picture unfolded in front of Shishi. Wow! Shishi's eyes widened as she looked out of the glass window. She couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. The bush-like corals were nothing special. At most, they looked like rockery in an aquarium tank. What dazzled Shishi were the colorful little fishes. Some were yellow all over, some were red and yellowish, some were white mixed with red, and some were black and white like a zebra. The most beautiful ones were the little fishes that had many different colors on their bodies, but were not messy. They were not very big, about the size of a palm or a finger. They swam happily between the gaps of the coral reef, as if they did not care about the behemoths that passed by them. Of course, perhaps they were used to being watched. So beautiful. "Papa, they are even more beautiful than Xian Air's goldfish." Although Shishi was actively telling her father about her discovery, in fact, she did not turn her head. Her line of sight had been firmly glued to these beautiful little fishes. Murphy was also fascinated, but she did not just play by herself. She was also holding the 4-month-old Tong Tong, so that he could also get closer to see the little fish. The little guy's round eyes followed the fish swimming in front of him. After a while, his little head was attracted by another little fish and turned to look at it. After a while, he turned his head and looked at his mother, as if he also wanted to tell his mother about his discovery. "Isn't it beautiful?" Murphy said with a smile, rubbing his little head intimately. Yang Yi heard the noise, turned around with the camera, and took photos of Murphy and her son. Just then, the little guy was teased by his mother and opened his mouth giggling. His pair of little dimples were very cute under the camera lens. "Papa, I also want to take photos of the little goldfish." Shishi remembered what she had done around this time last year, and turned her head excitedly to ask her father for the camera. The little reporter was officially online. She was holding the SLR camera. Although she was not very flexible, she was smart enough to use the small screen to take photos of the goldfish and the coral reef. Looking at Shishi having fun, Murphy and Yang Yi looked at each other and smiled, then turned around and sat together with their shoulders leaning against each other. If they wanted to see the whales, they had to go to the deep sea. Yang Yi and the others played on Green Island until 11 o'clock, then went back to the cruise ship to eat buffet. After lunch, their luxury cruise ship set off again to the vast ocean. However, it was not a good time to observe whales at this time of year. In Australia, whales migrated from May to November every year, and it was easier to see whales, even giant humpback whales, when they went out to sea to observe in July and September. Yang Yi and the others came at a bad time. Maybe they had some hope of seeing the minke whale, but luck was not on Yang Yi's side that day. The cruise ship had been sailing for more than 2 hours, and other than the seabird skimming the surface of the sea, there were no signs of whales. "I'm sorry, friends, but I have to go back." The bearded captain came over, shook his head, and spread his hands as he spoke in the midst of everyone's regretful voices. "Papa, what did he say?" She was confused. In fact, she could understand most of it, but she could not understand the deeper meaning of the captain's words. "The captain told us that we did not see any whales, but we have to go back now. We can't wait until it's dark," Yang Yi said to Shishi. "Papa, why can't we see any whales?" Shishi's delicate little face showed a disappointed expression, which made people feel sorry for her. However, she did not make a fuss this time. Instead, she sat in her father's arms and asked softly, "Maybe it's because the whale wants to leave a sense of mystery in front of you, Shishi, so that it can meet you again in the future," Yang Yi said with a smile. "Really?" Shishi was a little surprised. "Really, whales are very smart. They're different from fish. They're mammals like humans." "What's a mammal?" The boring journey back passed quickly with her father's witty explanation. However, just when Yang Yi thought that their journey in Australia was going to end so peacefully, the tourists on the deck suddenly cheered. "What happened?" A passionate black teenager ran to the cabin excitedly and shouted, "Hey, guys, come and see, there are dolphins, a lot of dolphins." Yang Yi quickly picked up Shishi and supported Murphy, whose legs were a little soft after sitting for a long time. They walked to the deck and to the side of the ship where everyone was gathered. They saw a group of black shadows moving up and down in the sparkling ocean under the sun. "Papa, where's Dolphin?" Shishi had not seen it yet. The little girl hugged her father's neck and looked around anxiously. "Look there are dolphins." Before Yang Yi could finish his sentence, as if they had sensed Lady Cece's arrival, the dolphins in the distance suddenly began to leap out of the sea one after another, drawing a beautiful arc in the air before diving back into the sea. "Wow!" Shishi saw it this time. The little girl opened her eyes wide and excitedly hugged her father's neck. Her body also rubbed up as if she wanted to go higher to see more dolphins. The dolphins were not afraid of human ships. They deliberately swam close to Yang Yi's cruise ship, and then jumped out of the water again to dance. At such a close distance, the dolphin's smooth body that looked like it was coated with oil, its short, silly beak, and the splashes of water that sparkled in the sun when they jumped were all clearly visible. Yang Yi hugged Shishi with one hand and grabbed the camera with the other to take pictures. He felt that the dolphins' vigorous figures in the camera were very handsome. Although Shishi looked greedily and forgot to speak, the little girl's eyes and eyebrows were full of joy. Her happy smile did not show any regret at all. "Shishi, we saw dolphins. In fact, from a scientific point of view, we also saw a big fish," Yang Yi said to Shishi with a smile as he watched the dolphins leave. "Hee, because dolphins are also very big." Shishi was satisfied to see the dolphins. She giggled and said to her father, "It's not just because of that. Dolphins also belong to the category of whales. They are actually a little similar to whales." Well, compared to the dolphins' dance, this science lesson was a little boring. Chapter 739. The 5-day trip was coming to an end. On the last day, Yang Yi didn't arrange any activities. Instead, he accompanied Murphy to go shopping. In this country where no one knew them, they were leisurely enjoying the life of an ordinary person. Today, Murphy had dressed Shishi up beautifully and adorably. Her adorableness lay in Shishi's apple-shaped hair. The top part of her hair was tied back with a cute wavy hair clip, while the rest of her hair was let down. The ends of her hair were gently curled by Murphy's fingers. This way, the little girl looked very cute and refreshing. Her beauty lay in Shishi's clothes. Today, Shishi wore a dress again. However, this time it was a spaghetti strap dress. The thin spaghetti straps hung over her shoulders, and there was a knot at the top. Of course, that was just for decoration. The dress was just above her knees, and the hem of the dress was slightly curled inward. It looked playful and beautiful. During the warm and even a little hot day, This kind of dress was very normal in this coastal city. Moreover, compared to a long dress, it better reflected the advantage of Shishi's slender and long legs. Yang Yi was in charge of taking care of Tong Tong today, so that Murphy could relax a little. Murphy, who was also dressed up beautifully, walked in front of the cute and beautiful Shishi while shopping. They were definitely a pair of hot mommies. They were comparable to Victoria and Little Seven. Of course, the shopping had come to an end. It was now time to send the letters to the post office. It was just a random post office on the street, so there weren't many people. Yang Yi, who was wearing a baby sling and sitting in front of Tong Tong in his father's arms, came back from the front desk after buying stamps and envelopes. He saw Shishi sitting on a high chair with her mother, arranging the photos that her father had printed out for her. These are the photos for Lu Weisha, and these are the photos for Xa and Air. The little girl's face was filled with a happy smile, and she muttered excitedly as she arranged the photos. When Murphy saw that Yang Yi had returned, she excitedly explained to Yang Yi, "I asked her to send a different picture to each child, so that they can bring it to class and share it with everyone." "That's good. Anyway, we have a lot of photos. There are different photos for each scenic spot." Yang Yi smiled. In fact, he didn't print it repeatedly, but Murphy thought that her idea was wonderful, and Yang Yi didn't expose her. During the process of sending the letters, Shishi had to do it herself, and Yang Yi just guided her from the side. Yang Yi even taught Shishi how to write the letters when they were resting in the hotel last night. Except for some words that couldn't be expressed in other ways, which required Yang Yi to write for her, Shishi used drawings to describe most of the content. For example, when my father and I went to see the big fish on the boat, Shishi really drew a boat and a fish. Although it was very simple, and she didn't draw the characteristics of a whale spraying water, such a simple letter made with crooked drawings looked very interesting. The only difficulty was that after Shishi drew one picture, she had to copy the same content 4 times. After all, she had to show her sincerity. This caused the little girl's patience to run out when she wrote the letter to Nan Jiaoyu, and the drawings on the paper became messy and difficult to recognize. However, when it came to sending the letters, Shishi was full of energy and energy. "Apply it here." Murphy helped her apply a little glue, and she heard the little girl call out crisply. Then she giggled and stuck the small stamp that her father gave her on the letter. Some of the glue overflowed and stained Shishi's small white fingers. She subconsciously wanted to wipe it on the little skirt in front of her. "Don't wipe it here." Murphy hurriedly stopped her. She took out a piece of wet tissue and let Shishi wipe her fingers. The 5 letters were all packed and pasted. The completion of this task made them feel very accomplished. Shishi didn't need her father's help. She held the 5 letters and stuffed them into the red mailbox. "Okay, but it will take a few days to send the letters. By the time you go back, the letters won't arrive so quickly." Yang Yi smiled and patted his daughter's small shoulders. He said, "But let them look forward to it. It will be more fun when they receive the letters." It was a short 5-day trip, so it wasn't particularly enjoyable. After all, they arrived in Australia in the middle of April. It was already autumn, and Tong Tong was still young. Most of the time, the adults, especially Murphy, had to take care of Tong Tong. It was difficult for them to enjoy themselves. Shishi was satisfied. She saw the kangaroo of her dreams, and went out to sea with her parents. She also saw beautiful dolphins. She was very happy along the way. However, Yang Yi didn't take his daughter to experience diving, or the more exciting water skiing experience. He felt a little regretful. But it didn't matter. There was still a long way to go. There would be opportunities to come to Australia again in the future. In the afternoon, they took a direct flight from Cairns to Sydney to Shanghai. Yang Yi and his family finally set foot on their journey home. However, during the long flight of more than 10 hours, Yang Yi didn't know that the domestic media had become very active because of his success abroad. Chuyu was an international student. He was currently studying at the California Institute of Technology in the United States. Early in the morning, he accidentally saw the news report about Yang Yi on the TV in the restaurant. At first, Chuyu only thought that Yang Yi in the video looked familiar. At first, he didn't think too much about it. However, when the camera turned and Murphy appeared in his field of vision, Chuyu was stunned. To be honest, the video taken by the girl in the bar was very amateur. The camera angle was not good enough. Her hands were shaking and the video was shaky. However, the pixel of her phone was still quite clear. In the video, he could see the faces clearly. F***CK, isn't that Murphy? That's Yang Yi? F***CK. No wonder he looked so familiar. Chuyu's jaw almost dropped. He was a fan of Yang Yi and Murphy. Although he was overseas, the circle of international students also paid attention to the domestic entertainment industry. But why was Yang Yi singing an English song? At first, Chuyu was attracted by the song's lively melody and beautiful voice. However, he did not expect Yang Yi or an Asian singer to sing it. But now not only did Yang Yi sing an English song, but he also sang it so well. Her fluent, natural, and perfect English accent made Chuyu, an international student from one of the top universities in the world, feel ashamed of himself. Is he that good? Chuyu saw that the TV news also interviewed Bruno Levin. This famous singer praised Yang Yi. Chuyu couldn't help but grumble happily. Chuyu also felt honored that his fellow countryman was recognized by a foreigner. Who knows who this person is? No one can find him. I like this song a lot, but I can only watch this lousy video. It's so uncomfortable. Chuyu was grumbling in Chinese. Now, a handsome white guy at the table next to him was talking to his female companion. Baby, if I know what song this is, I will definitely learn it and sing it for you. Chuyu listened and couldn't help but smile. Hey brother, do you want to know who he is? Let me tell you, Bruno Levin is right. It's very likely that this song was written by the man in the video. Chuyu smiled. Even though he was still single, the pride that Yang Yi had inspired made him proud enough to speak to other couples with his head held high. You know who he is? The handsome white guy was overjoyed. Of course. Chuyu turned on his phone and logged into a domestic website. He found Yang Yi's introduction with a picture of Yang Yi. He turned it to the handsome white guy and said proudly, he's a Chinese singer and songwriter. He has written many good songs. Oh, by the way, the beauty in the video is his wife. She's also a very famous singer in China. Chapter 740. Like Chuyu, there were many international students who recognized Yang Yi from the news or the videos recommended by video websites. Although not everyone was like Chuyu, who enthusiastically introduced Yang Yi to their foreign friends, most of the international students who recognized Yang Yi couldn't wait to tell their friends in China about their new discovery through micro-broadcasting or SNS. Song Ji, a second-year student at Haojing University in China, was also an out-and-out celebrity chaser. Not only did she chase after fresh meat, but she was also a fan of Yang Yi and Murphy. That night, Song Ji had just returned from the library when she received an SNS message from her sister who was studying abroad. She sent 2 links and said there was a surprise. Surprise? What surprise? Song Ji opened the first link suspiciously. She skillfully used her technology to cross the Pacific Ocean and successfully connected to a foreign video website. The first link pointed to the video of Yang Yi singing to Murphy. Women were more sensitive than men in this aspect. Song Ji just started watching and immediately recognized Yang Yi and Murphy. However, there were no subtitles and Song Ji couldn't understand what Yang Yi was singing. She only knew it was English and could only understand a few words. Then, Song Ji looked at the second link. It was a news video. This one was clearer and had complete subtitles. Song Ji still couldn't understand what the foreigners were saying. After all, she was like most of her countrymen and learned mute English. But from the subtitles, Song Ji could roughly understand what was happening. Song Ji sent 3 exclamation marks to her sister. Surprise, right? Her sister quickly replied, I knew you'd like it. What's going on? It seems like the foreigners don't know Yang Yi. Song Ji couldn't help but ask. How would they know our celebrities? Also, let me tell you, the song Yang Yi sang was too good. Now no one knows where this song came from. A bunch of foreigners are worried to death. They love that song. Song Ji saw her sister's message and replied without hesitation. Yang Yi wrote it. It must be Yang Yi who wrote it. How do you know? Do you have proof? Song Ji said matter-of-factly. I don't have any evidence, But such a nice song must have been written by Yang Yi. You're just making things up. You think I don't know that you're crazy about Yang Yi? If it wasn't written by Yang Yi, then it would be awkward. The elder sister was referring to Song Ji's awkwardness. Anyway, I believe it. When has Yang Yi ever sung other people's songs? Song Ji excitedly discussed with her sister. Forget it, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'm going to class. However, her sister had no intention of delving deeper into the matter. She only reminded Song Ji to pay more attention to the domestic news, and to let her know if there were any developments. Song Ji looked at her sister's grayed-out profile picture, and curled her lips. How boring. Song Ji had not finished chatting with him yet. She opened a fan group of Yang Yi and Mo Fei established by a fan and quickly sent 2 links to it. Before the administrator was about to question her, she typed a line of words. Wow, Yang Yi doesn't want to play with us anymore. This bastard, this pigeon, he brought Murphy abroad to show off their love. Suddenly, the group chat exploded. Many people asked, are you serious? You'll know once you watch the video. Now Yang Yi is a hot topic abroad. Song Ji quickly replied. The link can't be opened. Sister, are you sure you didn't send it wrongly? There were many computer noobs in the group. There were also those who knew a bit about technology. They said proudly, it's open. You have to go through the obstacles. It's actually a video from a foreign video website. No one thought of moving the video over, because there were copyright restrictions. Unless they had the authorization of the video's original author, they could only do so. Those who got there first could not wait to watch the video. They did not know what to do and could only stand on the wall and watch. They even wondered if Song Ji was deliberately mystifying or trying to achieve her own goals. But soon, news came from the front. The netizens who watched the video first excitedly said that Yang Yi sang a love song to Murphy in front of a group of foreigners. There are no subtitles and no lyrics. Can you understand it? Song Ji asked him curiously. I can understand it. The sound in the video is very clear. Obviously, this netizen was a low-key top student. Song Ji was excited. Brother, do a listening translation of the lyrics. I've listened to this song that Yang Yi sang a few times, but I don't know what to sing. Okay, don't say that you're abusing single people later. Hee hee. Anyway, I think the lyrics are too sweet. Their conversation completely whetted the appetites of the netizens who were watching before. Hurry up, which expert can tell us how to open this link? Forget it, I'll write a guide for you. Song Ji was very straightforward. While waiting for someone to translate the lyrics, she shared the method of crossing the mountains and crossing the seas with the fans in the group. Finally, more people were able to see the video. Later, when the fans were excitedly bragging or condemning Yang Yi and Murphy for showing off their love in front of foreigners, the netizen who went to do the listening translation came back and posted the translation of the lyrics. It's really sweet, very Yang Yi. The second link, the news said that they don't think this song was written by Yang Yi. I think it's true. Although it was only this fan group that was talking about it at first. But the news spread from 1 to 10, and from 10 to 100. Although it was the middle of the night in China, there were still many night owls gossiping with relish. After the news spread, some screenshots of the video were posted on micro-broadcasting and quickly spread. Today's media, especially the entertainment media, no one dared to underestimate the power of micro-broadcasting. There were even many entertainment reporters who no longer waited for the big stars, but sat in front of the computer all day long to browse micro-broadcasting, looking for big star news from various passers-by's micro-broadcasting. As a matter of fact, the news of Yang Yi becoming popular abroad had just spread in China, and there were already some reporters who got wind of it. It wasn't difficult for them to find the link and get more foreign media reports on this video. Chief Editor, have you decided on tomorrow's headlines? Yi Qing? AI compared to Yang Yi, he's already past his prime. Chief Editor, hurry up and change it, I have a big news here. Yes, that Yang Yi who was with Murphy. Both of them are in this news. They went on a trip to Australia, and then Yang Yi sang an English song for Murphy. I don't know how it suddenly became popular abroad. Now the foreign netizens all say that Yang Yi sang really well, and they like it a lot. Yes, it's definitely a big news. It hasn't spread in China yet, so if we report it first, the sales will definitely double. AI. Alright, it's settled then. Yang Yi and his family arrived at Shanghai's airport in the middle of the night. It was too late to rush back to Jiangcheng, so Yang Yi and his family found a hotel to rest. At the airport, Yang Yi and Murphy met a few reporters, but these reporters didn't know that a few entertainment media outlets were quietly brewing big news. Yang Yi and his family answered a few reporters' questions, then carried the sleepy Shishi and Tong Tong, and hurriedly left. The next morning, Mo Fei, who was tormented by little Momo on the plane and did not sleep well, was still lying in bed, unable to get up, but her mobile phone suddenly rang as if it was her life. Chapter 741. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of high heels came from afar and echoed in the corridor of Phoebe's studio. A slim office lady appeared at the end of the corridor. Passing by the office area, the employees who came early saw her and quickly greeted her. Good morning, Sister Xiaowan. Sister Xiaowan, you're back? Sister Xiaowan, why are you so beautiful today? Mo Xiaowan couldn't be reserved anymore. She tapped her fingers and smiled brightly. Look at you guys, you're all glib tongues. I haven't seen you for a few days on vacation, but your mouths are smeared with honey. Go to work. Sister Xiaowan, you haven't started work yet. You're here too early. Mo Xiaojuan's secretary came over quickly and opened the office door for her with a smile. Huai Brothers and Phoebe Studio were connected and managed by Mo Xiaowan. Although Yang Yi and Murphy were the leaders, these two guys didn't care about anything. Therefore, Mo Xiaowan had to be like Niu Meiling, in charge of the entire company's employees. However, Mo Xiaojuan's personality was very different from Niu Meiling's. She was more wild and like a boy, she hated evil and was more loyal. Therefore, she didn't treat her subordinates coldly and ruthlessly. Instead, she created the atmosphere of the company like a big family. This respect and closeness could sometimes coexist. Is there any news about the company's artists today? Mo Xiaowan took the tea from the secretary and asked casually. Sister Xiaowan, I was just about to tell you. The secretary pressed a few buttons on her phone and showed Mo Xiaowan a micro-broadcasting. This morning, in the car, I looked at the micro-broadcasting and saw that some netizens were asking about it. I don't know if it's true. Mo Xiaowan looked at it carefully. When she saw the screenshot of the video, her face showed a surprised expression. It was indeed Yang Yi and Murphy. Are there any more detailed reports? Mo Xiaowan frowned. The only information that she could decipher from the netizens' vague micro-broadcasting was that Yang Yi had sung for Murphy and had become popular in the US. The problem is Yang Yi and Murphy are not in the US. Let me check. The secretary hurriedly picked up her phone and searched the internet. Unexpectedly, it wasn't just micro-broadcasting. During her time in the company, some websites had already reposted the news from the entertainment tabloids and reported on this matter. Mo Xiaowan had a complete understanding of what had happened from the detailed report. They didn't even inform me that they were causing such a ruckus in Australia. Mo Xiaowan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. When she saw the keyword Australia, she could already confirm that this was not fake news fabricated by netizens. Sister Xiaowan, what should we do? Should we respond? The secretary asked doubtfully. I'll call and ask Sister Fei. According to the schedule, they should be back soon. Mo Xiaowan flipped through her notebook and waved her hand to ask the secretary to leave first. See if Manager AI is here? If she is, ask her to come to my office. Xiao AI was the manager of the public relations department, so Mo Xiaowan still had to discuss with her. The phone rang again and again, but Murphy did not pick it up. Are they not back yet? But if they are still on the plane, their phone should be turned off. Mo Xiaowan mumbled. Just as she was about to hang up, the phone was picked up. Hello. Mo Fei's sleepy voice came from the other side of the phone. It was still a nasal sound. Sister, it's me. You're still sleeping? Mo Xiaowan asked in surprise. You're not back from Australia yet? We're back. Murphy yawned and was a little more awake. I didn't sleep well on the plane last night. Mommy refused to sleep. and caused a ruckus for a long time. I just came back and came to the hotel to rest. I haven't slept enough yet. Where are you now? Mo Shawan asked with concern. Do you want me to send a car to pick you up? No, Yang Yi drove. Murphy murmured. You called early in the morning. Don't tell me you want to disturb my sleep. Early in the morning. What time is it now? Mo Shawan said helplessly. Let's get down to business, sister. Did someone take a video of you and brother-in-law in Australia? Did he give you a video of him singing an English song? At this time, Xiao Ai knocked on the door of Mo Xiaojuan's office. She sat down in front of Mo Xiaowan and saw that Mo Xiaowan was explaining to Murphy about the influence of the video. Wait, what song did you say it was? Mo Xiaowan quickly picked up a pen and wrote it down in her notebook. I'm yours. Well, okay, how are you going to deal with this? Xiao Ai saw Mo Xiaojuan's speechless expression. Okay, I'll deal with it. You go back to sleep. Then, Mo Xiaowan agreed with a wry smile and hung up the phone. What did Sister Fei say? Xiao Ai asked knowingly. In fact, after working for Murphy for so long, she also knew Murphy's character. She told us to deal with it ourselves or not. Mo Xiaowan shook her head helplessly at Xiao Ai. She really didn't know what to do with her cousin. Murphy just wanted to sleep on the phone and didn't care about this matter at all. It's like I'm famous? Oh, there's nothing else. Although Sister Fei doesn't care, we can't miss this opportunity. Xiao Ai pondered and said, Sister Fei is also in a semi-comeback state. If she can return to the public's view in this incident, it will be worth dozens of promotions we arranged. This song was written by your boss. That's the name of the song. Mo Xiaowan copied the song name on a sticker and handed it to Xiao Ai. You can make some appropriate responses. When they come back to Jiangqing later, I'll ask them for some photos. Seize the opportunity and moderate the publicity. We'll do what we need to do. In Shanghai, after Murphy was woken up by Mo Xiaowan, she was in a half-asleep state. She curled up in bed in a daze until she heard Tong Tong crying. The little guy woke up. Murphy couldn't rest, so she had to get up, change Tong Tong's diaper and feed him. While she was doing this, the door was pushed open and Yang Yi walked in with Xixi. He had just taken Xixi to the restaurant downstairs for breakfast. At this moment, Yang Yi also came up with a large bag of packed breakfast in his hand. Mom, Papa and I bought breakfast for you. Xixi giggled as soon as she entered the door. She threw half of her body on the bed and chattered to her mother for praise. It's good that you're awake. It's still warm. Yang Yi smiled and opened the bag on the table in the hotel room. He took out the breakfast inside one by one and introduced it to Murphy. Blood glutinous rice mixed with meat sauce, fried dough sticks and tea eggs. Don't think that this name is bad, but it's actually the best local breakfast in Shanghai in this hotel. This is soup dumplings, your favorite. Shanghai wonton, soy milk. Xixi jumped out of bed, licked her little tongue, and pointed at the rice dumplings and said to Murphy, Mom, this is super delicious. The little girl's stomach was already bulging, but she had already lost her appetite. Just listening to you guys, my stomach is growling. Murphy smiled and hooked Xixi's little face. At this time, your stomach should be hungry. Yang Yi stretched out his hand. Give me the rice dumplings. You go eat breakfast. And Murphy sweetly agreed. Her heart was overflowing with happiness at this moment. Murphy ate breakfast while chatting about what Mo Xiaowan called in the morning. Yang Yi and Xixi were playing with Tong Tong, who was lying on the bed. The little guy tried to turn over, which was a new skill he had mastered not long ago. Compared to turning over with the help of his mother's strength, Tong Tong could now turn over on his own. Moreover, he was very interested in this sport, and enjoyed turning over and over. It should be that bar girl who took it. It's normal for it to be popular. Who asked me to sing you such a good song? Yang Yi casually responded. Yang Yi's attitude was similar to Murphy's. Anyway, they were already public figures. These popularity and media reports could be completely ignored. No matter how others made a fuss, it would not affect the peaceful life of their family. However, after hearing Yang Yi's words, Murphy immediately turned her head and swept her sharp eyes over. You really paid attention to her at that time. Chapter 742. Some people were happy while others were sad. Lee Man went to Xiangnan to record High Energy Challenge, as usual today. However, as soon as she got off the plane, she was surrounded by reporters at the airport exit. Lee Man, photos of Dozun being in intimate contact with a man in a nightclub. What do you think? Is it true that your relationship with Dozun is broken, and that your marriage is only in name? Zhuo Zai once again summed up the evidence of your relationship problems with Dozun. For example, you rarely hold hands in the same frame. How do you plan to respond to these questions? The reporters blocked Lee Man's way and bombarded her with questions. Lee Man took He Chao without any expression. Under the escort of her agent Yi Qi and several airport security guards, she got into the nanny van. Of course, in order to appear friendly, Yi Qi stayed and answered a few questions on behalf of Lee Man. Regarding this news, we have already made a response on micro-broadcasting. The rumor of Dozun and Man's relationship problems is not true. He went to the nightclub as a normal social interaction. The so-called intimate photos were just a misunderstanding caused by the shooting angle. Moreover, everyone will think that it's ridiculous. Dozun is already married. How could he be in intimate contact with a man? Yi Qi said. Was Lee Man angry after seeing the photos? Did she quarrel with Dozun? The reporter asked. Husband and wife need to trust each other to go far. Man understands Dozun's character and is willing to believe him, so their relationship has always been good. Thank you for your concern. Yi Qi maintained her formal smile and nodded to the reporters. Then she got into the nanny van and left. So annoying. After the van left, Lee Man angrily stomped her feet. The cold and aloof expression she maintained just now disappeared. Dozun, that fool. I told him to pay attention to his personal image after marriage. He even took photos when he went out to play. Alright Man, don't be angry. Isn't he just like that? The company also told him to pay attention in the future. Yi Qi comforted. The most annoying thing is this Zhuo Zai. Why does he target me every day? As a paparazzi, doesn't money work? Lee Man was annoyed. What this person wants is fame. You see, he frequently appears in front of the stage. I'm afraid this paparazzi's ambition is big. Yi Qi snorted. He probably wants to use you as an example to increase his popularity. Yi Qi inadvertently revealed LVU's secret, but it was useless to know LVU's purpose. She said helplessly, but the company has checked. This person is backed by a new internet media platform, micro-broadcasting. I don't know who is supporting him, so his style of doing things is different from other paparazzi. He would rather expose than ask for money. The company can't do anything to him. Good afternoon, Sister Man. Lee Man arrived at the shooting location of Xingyao. Along the way, many people greeted her. Lee Man was in a bad mood today, but as a celebrity, she still squeezed out a smile and reluctantly nodded to the other party. However, when she walked into the lounge, some of the staff started gossiping. Do you think it's really like what Zhuo Zai said, that Lee Man and Dozun are only a married couple on paper? When Lee Man was recording the program, she didn't see Dozun come to visit. It's possible. I feel that Zhuo Zai's revelations are more realistic. But they often show off their love on micro-broadcasting. Lee Man also sent the dishes she cooked for Dozun. Their show of love is very fake. It always gives people the feeling that they are showing off their love for the sake of showing off their love. You see, Yang Yi and Murphy are different. They don't show off their love on micro-broadcasting. At most, they share some interesting things about their children's daily lives, but they are often photographed by the media together. Hey, did you see the news this morning? Yang Yi and Murphy were photographed by passers-by playing in Australia. Yang Yi sang an English song for Murphy. This video also became popular abroad. They went to play again. You said that Murphy is not in a hurry to come back and go on more programs. Why is she playing every day? She married a good husband. If I had a multi-talented, considerate and gentle man like Yang Yi as my husband, I would be willing to die. Wishful thinking. The topic changed a little, but listening to their conversation, an ordinary scriptwriter in the planning department suddenly asked, "What did you say Yang Yi and Murphy went to Australia to do?" Oh, you can search the news later. You will definitely see it. They probably went to Australia for a holiday during the Qingming festival. During the trip, the gossipy companion excitedly told her about Yang Yi singing for Murphy. But the scriptwriter was in a trance and didn't listen. Yang Yi was the program designer of the Limit Challenge. A few days ago, Luo Jinting asked the planning department to study the Limit Challenge more, hoping to innovate and come up with new ideas. Everyone thought for a long time, but couldn't think of a way to jump out of the framework of the Limit Challenge. But now, a few keywords suddenly connected in the scriptwriter's mind. Travel, challenge, celebrity. It seemed that a new program idea was on the verge of appearing, but she still needed time to think carefully. Yang Yi and the others returned to Jiangqing in the afternoon. In the evening, Lan Xian, who had just returned from kindergarten, came to visit them. Uncle Yang, is Xixi home? The little girl was very polite. She greeted Yang Yi sweetly at the entrance of the courtyard. Yes. We just came back from Australia and bought some delicious food. We will bring it home for you later. Yang Yi was watering the flowers in the flower bed. He smiled as he opened the courtyard door. Really? There's delicious food? Hearing Yang Yi's words, Lan Xian was suddenly energized and said excitedly. Xianer. Xixi, who was playing on the balcony on the second floor, heard Lan Xian's voice. She leaned on the railing and looked down, shouting happily. Xixi. Lan Xian looked up and shouted happily. Xixi, you didn't go to kindergarten today. Chi-Chi and I missed you so much. Hee, I missed you too. Xixi responded happily. Lu Weisha didn't come to kindergarten either. Lan Xian said. You and Lu Weisha didn't come. Why didn't Lu Weisha come? I don't know. Lan Xian shook her head in confusion. The two young ladies didn't think that it was strenuous to talk like this, so they just chatted loudly. After a while, Lan Xian remembered that Uncle Yang wanted to bring her snacks, so she couldn't wait to run to the living room. There were quite a lot of snacks bought from Australia, because he wanted to bring some for Xixi to share with the children in kindergarten. Now that Lan Xian was in a favorable position, she couldn't wait to tear open a bag of jerky. The long jerky was filled with saliva as she chewed on it. Looking at the way she smacked her lips, it was very tasty. Xian, I've sent you a letter. I sent letters to you, Lu Weisha, Chi-Chi, Chen Shiyin and Zhaoyu. Xixi came downstairs and couldn't wait to tell her friends. In front of delicious food, everything was fleeting clouds. Lan Xian took another bite and chewed in her mouth, then said slowly, I didn't see your letter. I sent it yesterday. My papa said it would take many days to send it. Xixi counted with her little fingers for a while, then giggled and said, Oh, I don't know when it will arrive. Xixi, you went to Australia with your parents. Was it fun? Lan Xian asked curiously. It was fun. Xixi happily introduced it to her friends. Papa and Mom and I saw a lot of fun things. There was a big giraffe, but Papa said we couldn't buy it back, Xixi said excitedly, while Lan Xian ate excitedly, occasionally looking up at Xixi. Listening to stories? It was nothing more than a spice for her. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.